Okay. All right. Good evening. My name is Susan Rose, and I am chair of the City of Elmhurst Zoning and Planning Commission. And I would now like to open the regularly scheduled meeting of this commission. Before we do, we are in the time of virtual meetings. So we have a few additional protocols we need to run through. The first one is to check if everyone can hear me. So I'm going to go down and I would ask you of two things. One, please keep your microphone muted until you are asked to speak, and you would be asked to unmute. So we have a lot of people here who want to talk, and we have our city IT person who will, if you're not muted, he'll go ahead and mute you during it. It's just so that everybody can hear. So, but I'm going to run through and ask if people can hear me. First, let me ask the applicant, can you hear me? You need to unmute and say yes. Oh.
Yes, we're capable of hearing you, Chairman.
Thank you. Aaron, in the public comment room, can you hear me?
Chairman Rose, we can hear you, but we're at max volume, and if you could speak a little louder, that would be appreciated.
I was going to say I can barely hear Miss Rose.
Can you hear me now?
Better.
I'm going to make it bigger.
But I have you at 100%, so.
I can't go much more than this. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So in the public comment room, is it better?
A little bit, Chairman. I mean, we can hear you, but it's faint as you get farther in the room. So you may see us readjusting.
Okay, that's fine. Eileen Franz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Emily Egan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Snyder, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Garland, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Commissioner Hoffman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
City Attorney Acker, can you hear me? I can't hear you. Even with your microphone unmuted, I cannot hear you. Still cannot. So I'll let you work on that problem and get that figured out. Court reporter Kiki and Andriopoulos, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Commissioner Pittman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Commissioner McCoy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Commissioner Callaway, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you, Chair Rose.
Okay. I'm not going to go through every person on the public, but I'm going to ask if anyone from the public who is here on Zoom can, Commissioner Burns, I see you now. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. So if there's anyone from the public who cannot hear me, can you please unmute your microphone? And of course, how would you know if you can't hear me?
Commissioner Rose?
Oh.
Commissioner, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen?
I was going to actually ask Andy to clarify. I do believe we may need to go and ask everybody who is on the call if they can be heard. Is that correct, Andy?
Yes, I agree. I think you should ask everyone if they can hear and if they can, and if they're heard.
I will now do that. Karen Goldbullion, am I saying your name correctly? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. I'm going through here. Jerry Buss's iPad, can you hear me? I'm going to ask you to unmute so I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Great. Can you hear
Randall Buss?
Randall Buss is my wife's iPad.
Randall Buss. Okay, I'll try to remember that, but I just may call you Jerry at some point. Sorry. Tom Diamond, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Jessica Noonan, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Rachel Robert, can you hear me? Can you unmute yourself to hear me?
Yes, I can. I apologize. Thank you.
You know what? We're all learning the joys and the ins and outs of Zooming together. Mike Mondas, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Excellent. Lauren, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Eric Johnson, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Shannon Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Karen Heil, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Bridget Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. Or I can put the video on. 433299, I don't know your name, but can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Just can.
Deborah Orth, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
PPLLC, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you.
I think this is
Galaxy
more because it's a
S8
public
Plus,
record.
can you hear me?
So,
How many are on?
there's good.
I'm going to ask you to
But they've
unmute
already she's got
Galaxy
notifications.
S8 Plus.
Well, listen carefully.
Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Rose, you're garbled. I don't know if somebody else is on. I'm having some feedback issue.
Everyone should be muted except me at this point, except when you're called upon. So Galaxy S8 Plus, I cannot hear you. You are muted. If you will unmute and let me know, but I cannot hear you. Abuna, can you hear me? Please.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Lue, I'm sorry. Molly Novak, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Mike Novak, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Karen Cienko, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I believe that is all. Or no, let me just go in case there's anyone else at the next.
Chair Rose, just public comment room 2. We got to open this up.
Okay, public comment room 2. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Is there a staff person in public comment room number 2?
Yes, Mike Stetson. I just queued up the monitor board and everything looks good.
Okay.
And Chairman Rose, this is Aaron Jason. I will monitor both for public comment.
Excellent. I thank everyone for your patience. I will tell you, this is the first large meeting we've had on Zoom. So, you know, we're all going to learn something from it. And if I make mistakes, please beg your indulgence, and I'll do the same for you before we continue on. So I'm now going to ask City Planner Eileen Franz to please call the roll to establish a quorum. So everyone should mute, please, until
Oops.
Susan, you are muted.
I jumped the gun there. I'm going to ask everyone to mute until your name is called, and then you can unmute.
Commissioner Burns. Commissioner Burns.
I am here.
Commissioner Callaway.
Here.
Commissioner Garland.
Here.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Here.
Commissioner McCoy.
Here.
Commissioner Pittman.
Here.
Commissioner Snyder.
Here.
Commissioner Uditsky, I believe, is absent. Chair Rose.
Here. We have a quorum.
I am mute right now.
What?
I am mute right now.
I'm hearing
Yes.
people talk.
Yes.
Okay, please mute.
I don't know. You wait till she asks.
Whoever is not, could you just mute?
Jerry Buss's iPad is not muted.
Jerry,
Oh,
Could you please mute? I'm going to mute you. Okay, there you go. Thank you. I know it's difficult. I really understand that. So if we ask you to mute and unmute, it has no reflection on you or your character. It's just simply, we're all learning this new way. So please excuse us. We don't mean to be rude with this at all. We've come to the part of our agenda where it's public comment. I want to, however, define for you what this public comment is. This is public comment about any zoning issue. I want to advise you, however, if you are here to make comment on the case tonight, this is not the time for you to speak. This is for anyone to speak on any zoning matter. The reason I advise you not to speak at this point is that anything you say during this public comment is not recorded by our court reporter. Your voice will not be heard. We can listen to it, but we are obligated, in fact, to not consider what you have to say when we go to deliberations. So if you want to make a comment on the case we're going to talk about, there's going to be another time where you actually will you'll have more time to speak. So that sounds like I don't want you to talk. That's not true. I just want to make sure that your voice is heard on the case that you want to speak about. So is there anyone who wants to make a general comment about zoning or any zoning issue in the city of Elmhurst at this time?
This is great. Chairman Rose, we do have a member of the public in conference room 2-3 who would like to speak.
Masked or no mask?
You can take it off if you'd like to.
Awesome.
You have 3 minutes to speak. Could just give us your name and
Chair Rose, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. All you other commissioners, thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to express as a community member how difficult it has been to go through this process and our current how we go through zoning issues in the city. I'd like to raise that up as a concern, and maybe we would take a look at how we do this on either in cases to come forth, and as we just take a look at maybe giving the community more time and the neighborhood to really get time to analyze what is actually impacting. So thank you so much again for everything that you guys do, and gals, it's a tough job. So thank you. What's that?
Give your name too.
Oh, Rob Eisenmeyer. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. We certainly are always looking at the process. I think the process is even more difficult now that we're on Zoom, but we're doing the best we can, but we are continually looking at the process. So thank you for your comments. So anyone else want to make a comment at this point? Okay. I will close the public comment. And before I close the public comment, I'm going to ask, and we do this because we are virtual. I'm going to ask Eileen Franz to please check her voicemail and email to see if anyone in the community has a general public comment about zoning they wish to make.
I'm actually going to request that Emily do that since she is downstairs. If she wouldn't mind running to my office and checking the planning info, that would be great. And the phone.
There were no voicemails and no emails for public comment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks, Emily. Thanks. Let me ask then is there a receipt of any written communication we should know about at this point?
Everything that we've received until about 5 o'clock this evening, 5:30, has been posted to board docs.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on to the business before the committee. The first is the approval of minutes of the January 5th meeting of the Zoning and Planning Commission. Can I have a motion to approve and a second to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Pittman and second from Commissioner Garland. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections anyone would like to make in the minutes? Seeing none, I will ask City Planner Eileen Franz to please poll the commission.
Thank you. Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes, minutes are approved. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the case that we have this evening. Before we do that, I want to preface that with just because we have a lot of people interested about the process we use that we'll use tonight. It's the process that we use really for all zoning cases. I'm especially sensitive to Rob, and I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name, the man who spoke really first about this process. So I want to, make it completely transparent how we will do this. So the way the process moves here is that the petitioner themselves first has really the floor to really present their case. They have as much time to present their case as they believe they need to do that. So after that point, then the commission itself really will have time to ask any questions of the applicant that they deem appropriate. And they will have as much time as the commission believes they need. All commissioners can question and ask any questions about that at that point. The next step will be that there will be public testimony taken. And at this point, there's 5 minutes allowed for that. However, okay, let me be very clear that we have several things in play here. One, we will end our meeting tonight at 10 o'clock, no matter what. So if there's not enough time for everyone to be heard, we will continue the public hearing until February 2nd at our next meeting where we can do that. So I say that to say, if we get to, it's 9:30, it's 20 to 10, and we have 15 or 20 people who want to talk, you'll be able to talk, trust me, but you may have to wait until our February 2nd meeting, but we want to give everybody sufficient time to do that. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that. We want to give full consideration to this, so that really is an important piece of that. When we get to public testimony, that piece tonight, I'll go over what the guidelines are for that, which is, I'll just briefly say them now, but I'll talk about them more in detail at that point, which is you do have, there's 5 minutes, but you also have the right to cross-examine the petitioner in this case. So you can ask questions of the witness, you can ask questions of the evidence, you can give opinions, and there really is no time limit on that, except I would encourage you to, if someone else has said exactly what you want to say, you can get up and just say, someone else said exactly what I want to say. You don't need to say it over again. We will have a written record of this as well as listen, so that I want to tell you, everyone on this commission will listen with every ounce of energy that they have, and they will listen with respect to you and hear what you have to say. So I would ask you in your discussion, in your testimony, or if you wish to cross-examine the petitioner, that you be two things, both efficient and respectful. And it will be my job as chair truly to make sure that that occurs, that we are all respectful to each other. That's what this is about. So that's kind of how we will run this meeting. And if There's no time for everyone to speak. Again, the public hearing will be continued until, I believe it's February 2nd. Is that correct, Eileen?
That is correct.
Groundhog Day. No special meaning to that, but it will be Groundhog Day. So I will now ask city staff, I will hand this over to Eileen Franz to please introduce this case, and then I will ask the court reporter to swear in the speakers. And what I will ask her to do is to swear in everybody who wishes to speak. Whether you are able to speak tonight or not, we'll see. But if you even think you're going to speak, I'm going to ask her to. I'm going to ask you to please raise your hand, and she will swear you in. And then we will ask the applicant to begin their testimony. So, Eileen, can you please introduce this case to us?
Yes, thank you, Chair Rose. This is case 20P19. The application was filed October 19th, 2020. The applicant and owners are 481 Spring Road LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci as managers, 483 Spring Road LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci as managers, 469 Spring Road LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci managers, 283 Eggleston LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci managers, 485 to 489 Spring Road LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci managers, and Eggleston Street LLC, Vito and Mariana Moreci managers. The legal notice was published December 31st, 2020 for this case. The signs were posted December 30th, 2020, and the mailing was sent out December 31st, 2020. The public hearing is this evening, January 20th, 2021.
Thank you very much. I will now ask the court reporter to please swear in anyone who wishes to give testimony on this particular case tonight, or if we continue it again, which is highly likely, I don't know, to the next meeting. I'm going to encourage everyone to please be sworn in from the public who would like to speak.
Okay, would everybody raise their right hands for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that all of the testimony you give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Is that sufficient, court reporter? Is that sufficient?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we take you at your word. I'll now hand this over to the applicant, who I'm going to ask city staff to please allow them to have control of the screen. I know they have a presentation they want to make. So please introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Chair Rose, while that is happening, I just want to, I neglected to read the request into the record, if you wouldn't mind if I do that while they're getting the room set up down there.
Please do.
So the applicant is requesting conditional use permits to construct and operate 2 surface parking lots to serve the properties commonly known as 481 Spring, 483 Spring, 485 to 89 Spring Road, 272 Eggleston, 283 Eggleston, 465 to 69 Spring Road, plus the alley, and 276 West Eggleston. That is the vacant land on Eggleston Avenue, for the purpose of constructing and operating 2 surface parking lots at 272 West Eggleston and 276 West Eggleston and 283 West Eggleston in the vacated alley. There are also plats of consolidation associated with this request that are can be processed administratively, but they were included in the information so that everyone is aware of what is happening at the property.
Okay, thank you. I will now hand this over to the applicant.
My name is Scott Day, D-A-Y. I'm an attorney with the firm of Day & Robert. We are located at 300 East 5th Avenue, Suite 365 in Naperville, Illinois. I am here with my partner, Rachel Robert, and we have the privilege of representing the Moreci family in this application. This application involves Roberto's Ristorante and Pizzeria for a parking lot behind. They also own the multi-tenant office building and retail building at the opposite corner and are seeking a conditional use for parking lots behind that building as well. This is a conditional use application number 20P19. You can see the two parking lots that we propose, as well as the relationship of those parking lots to the buildings on the frontage. For the record, we've made sure that our address is in there as well as our logo. The ownership of the properties has been depicted in detail. They are color coded. These are multiple LLCs that are owned by the Moreci family, but everything there in the color code is a Moreci parcel of property. You can see that the two parking lots also involve multiple different zoning districts as well. This is a conditional use request. The applicant is requesting two separate yet directly related conditional uses. The requested conditional uses would permit applicant to construct and operate two surface parking lots immediately adjacent to two commercial buildings having frontage on Spring Road. Both of the parking lots to be constructed, as well as the commercial properties with frontage on Spring Road, are owned by the Moreci family. The conditional use requests do not require any change in the zoning, nor do they require any variation or relief from any of the bulk regulations for any of the zoning districts involved. Rather, these conditional uses for parking lots are expressly permitted in each of the zoning districts established by the City of Elmhurst under section 22.242(3)A. We've cited that in full, but the relevant part is bolded, and it essentially says that parking spaces to serve office, commercial, or industrial buildings or uses may be located within 300 feet of such use if such spaces are located in an office, commercial, or industrial district, or are located in a residence district on a lot which abuts the office, commercial, or industrial district. And in this case, we have to file for a conditional use. This is a particular type of zoning. The distance that we are involved from each of the buildings has been measured, and this document has been provided to the city staff to be clear that we comply with this particular regulation. And since these are conditional uses, they are actually acknowledged as being permitted within the zoning districts assigned by the City of Elmhurst. Illinois case law of the Supreme Court holds that this fact constitutes a legislative finding that surface parking lots are an appropriate or compatible use adjacent to the single-family homes if they can fulfill the conditional use standards. From a disclosure standpoint, the north parking lot is made up of two distinct lots. The main lot is lot 2 from a residential subdivision. There used to be a house on that approximately two decades ago that was demolished. Connected to that is a vacated 15-foot wide alley that the Moreci family purchased from the city several years back. Those lots, if we get the conditional use for this particular parking lot, will be consolidated, and the consolidation plat will be filed and recorded with the City of Elmhurst. Similarly, the south lot is made up of two separate lots. Lot number 2 to the north currently has an old house on it that's been vacant for some time. And the southerly portion of the south parking lot is made up of part of what was once lot 5. Those two parcels will similarly be consolidated. We are not owners of the public alley that's adjacent to this particular parking lot. So that is not part of the consolidation plat. Consolidation plats are a little bit different. These will be processed in a little different procedure. These consolidation plots will merge the currently separate lots of record into a single lot of record for each parking lot. But this process is known as consolidation. This consolidation, because the lots are small, is done by an administrative process. Under the city code, consolidations that are less than an acre do not require a public hearing or a public meeting of the Plan Commission. These consolidation plats will be processed administratively by the city planning and zoning officials to make sure that we comply with all of the regulations. These consolidation plats do not require consideration or deliberation of the Planning and Zoning Commission this evening. Our team is made up of many disciplines. Roberto's Restaurant is the owner of the property. They are the operator of the main user of these two parking lots. Space Co. is our consulting and engineering consultants for this particular project. They have done the site work and the layout, and they have also done the stormwater engineering. Bernanke and Associates completed the photometric study for this particular project to make sure that our lighting standards would meet all of the codes and would not leak over the property lines in excess of that which is permitted. And KLOA, as our traffic and parking engineering firm, they have studied the area for parking deficiencies, and they have prepared and completed the traffic report as well as the supplement. Our firm name is there listed as well. Each of these witnesses are available for questioning and cross-examination via the Zoom format being employed by the city under the restrictions associated with the historic pandemic. These experts have additionally submitted written reports or materials to the city professional staff and are on file under board docs for the case. Pasquale Moreci and his father Vito are here present with me this evening in the conference room. They are at 481 South Spring Road in Elmhurst, Illinois, 60126. Michael Mondas, our engineer from Spaceco, is with us this evening. His address is 9575 West Higgin Road. Can't see the suite because it's blocked out by Chairman Rose. There we go, Suite 700. And then Louis Abuna is our professional traffic engineer with KLOA. They are located at 9575 West Higgins Road, Suites 400, Rosemont, Illinois, 60018. Okay, at this point in time, I would like to introduce Pasquale Moreci. He is going to tell you a little bit about Roberto's and a little bit why they need this particular application. Pasquale?
My name is Pasquale Moreci. I reside at 279 West Claremont here in Elmhurst. I was born and raised here in Elmhurst from the time I was born in 1973. My parents came from Europe in 1972, and this is where they actually landed. I graduated from York in 1992. I belong to Immaculate Conception Church. Since 1985, my parents, Vito and Mary, and my sister Rose and I have worked as a family together at Roberto's. My family and I have worked, my family and our staff have worked hard as a team making Roberto's what it is today with a strong community support. My family purchased Roberto's January 15th of 1985 when it was just a little carryout. In 1983, we opened adjacent a small dining room. And in 1994, we purchased a property and put an addition and moved our kitchen to where the carryout is today. And in 1996, we had expanded the restaurant and put in a small bar. And in 1998, we have purchased a location where the restaurant sits today in the 465 Spring Road building. And in 1999, we then purchased 481 Spring Road property, which is adjacent to our kitchen for prepping and our small office. Roberto's currently seats 220 patrons as a staff of 70 employees.
Sure. Okay. This particular picture is a photograph of the multi-tenant commercial building with frontage on Spring Road in Eggleston. And we wanted to get you a feel for the area behind this particular building where the lot is proposed. We have several pictures depicting the rear lot area. This shows the area where we propose to pave and put in parking spaces adjacent to the alleyway. You can see that there are overhead lines at this particular location. There used to be a house at this site, but it was demolished several years ago. We have additional pictures of this particular lot. This gives a picture from Eggleston Street, and you can see the green space where the expansion is proposed to be located, and the existing parking lot and the parking spaces that are already used and occupied at this location. We have a third particular photograph of this particular location as well. This is the actual sign posted for tonight's meeting. Next, we have the Roberto's restaurant. You can see the temporary dining facilities in the tents that are located there, as well as the outside dining that has been encased in plastic during the pandemic. Behind this facility is an alleyway with parking, garbage dumpsters, exposed garage doors. This is an old industrial, essentially commercial service area, and this is the way that it appears today. This is the area where we propose to knock down that White House and install parking at this particular location. What you're looking there in the center of the picture is actually a municipal-owned 15-foot wide alley. The next photograph also depicts this area. You can see the service bays, the garbage dumpsters that are located at this alley. This is the way this particular area was designed and utilized for decades. It essentially was the service corridor and parking and commercial access for vehicles, trucks, service supply, and everything under the sun. The last picture shows additional photographs of this area, and you get a pretty good idea of what the neighborhood is looking at currently and has been looking at for decades. We also have a big, huge propane tank that is there. One of the properties apparently was serviced by gas. Fencing, landscaping, lighting. We are fully prepared to provide fencing, landscaping, or both to accommodate the reasonable requests of our neighbors. The attorneys, that includes me, have repeatedly reached out to the neighbors for input on these issues in a concerted effort to collaborate and address any concerns they may have. We actually met with a number of the neighbors this evening, courtesy of a meeting that was arranged by Otis and his family. And we had a very productive meeting. We look forward to further input from them regarding landscaping, fencing, lighting, and other issues related to the project. And we thank them for the meeting. Hours of operation. Go ahead, Pasquale, if you'll address this.
Sure, the hours of operation, open from 11 a.m. to 12 midnight. We will need to be able to use the parking lots between the hours of 10 a.m. For prep until 12 o'clock midnight. Staff will normally clean up and be out of the restaurant within an hour by 1 a.m. if need be. Roberto's and other business owners in the area are in great need of additional parking along Spring Road, especially north of the Prairie Path Lane. We have been urging the city to create more parking for years to make it more efficient and convenient for the patrons and business along Spring Road. Addressing all legal and engineering requirements and the concerns of the neighbors have been incredibly expensive for my family. And it is occurring in an unprecedented and difficult year within the restaurant industry due to COVID-19 pandemic. We desperately need parking to serve the needs of our customers and on behalf of my family. We simply want this to be done in a transparent, professionally designed fashion without cutting corners.
Thank you, Pasquale. At this time, I would like to introduce our professional engineer from Spaceco. His name is Michael S. Mondas. We previously instituted information regarding his address and location. Mr. Mondas, would you please take it away with your testimony?
Yes, thank you, Scott. Next slide. As Scott introduced, my name is Michael Mondas. I'm a principal with Spaceco Incorporated. I received a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Bradley University. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of Illinois and 3 other states that surround Illinois. I'm also a certified floodplain manager, and I have over 27 years of experience in site development engineering. Next slide, please. The proposal as presented is for the construction of 2 separate parking lots to be built on parcels that are east of Spring Road that are separated by Eggleston Avenue. Both parking lots provide city ordinance compliant setbacks, parking stall and drive aisle dimensions. A total of 26 stalls are proposed between the 2 parking lots. Next slide. This plan is a blow-up of the north parking lot. The north parking lot provides 19 parking stalls on a 9,026 square foot parcel. Setbacks from the property lines to the proposed curbs are 25 feet along Eggleston, 3.8 feet to the east property line, 2.9 feet to the north property line. Also, the drive aisle at the back of the building to the west will be reconfigured so that it is one-way east off of Spring and south behind the building, and the parking stalls that are behind that facility will be angled. No setback from this parking lot to that property along the west property line where it abuts the existing driveway behind the building is being provided. Fencing is also proposed along the east and north sides of the parking lot. It should also be noted that this layout represents a reduction of 1 parking stall from the initial site plan that was submitted back in October. This stall was given up to provide a space at the north end of the lot so that cars could turn around if they entered off of Eggleston and there was no spaces to park. They had the ability to do a a turnaround at the north end of the lot. Next slide, please. This exhibit is a blow-up of the south parking lot plan. The south parking lot provides 37 parking stalls on a 19,068 square foot parcel. Setbacks from the property lines to the proposed curbs along Eggleston are 25 feet, 5 feet to the east property line, and 10 foot to the north property line where this parcel abuts the rear of the existing houses to the east. And the setbacks vary from 2.2 feet to 16.24 or 16.4 feet to the south where the parcel abuts the Prairie path. The parking lot directly abuts the existing alley to the west that's behind the current restaurant. Fencing is also proposed along the east side of the lot and on the north side adjacent to the rear of the existing houses. The south parking lot is also provided an accommodation for a possible bike rack in the front setback along Eggleston. As with the north lot, the south lot also has a reduction of one parking space from the initial site plan that was provided, again, for a turnaround at the far east end of this lot. Next slide. In our application, we submitted photometric drawings. This drawing represents the photometric analysis that was provided for the south parking lot. The south parking lot will provide 4 16-foot tall poles with LED fixtures for lighting. This is an analysis showing that the lighting levels at the property line conform to the city code requirement of 0.2-foot candles. Next slide. This is the, again, photometric analysis for the north parking lot. Similar to the south, we have 16-foot tall poles, 2 of them with LED fixtures, again, representing that we have 0.2-foot candles at the property line in accordance with city code requirements. Next slide. This slide shows the ordinance required setbacks for the north parking lot per the zoning ordinance. It's noted that the side and rear yard encroachments where the parking lot encroaches, the pavement of the parking lot encroaches into those setbacks where it's proposed, but those encroachments are allowed per the zoning code. The front setback along Eggleston Avenue is provided, which is 25 feet. Next slide. This is again the south parking lot, shows the ordinance required setbacks for the south parking lot per the zoning ordinance. Again, all the setbacks are met with the proposed parking lot except the rear setback, and again that encroachment is allowed per code. Next slide. This is an exhibit that we prepared showing the stormwater strategy for this project. Both lots are required to meet city ordinances relative to impervious area lot coverage and stormwater management. Both lots will be provided with permeable pavement areas that will allow stormwater runoff to infiltrate into the stone base below the pavement and not run off. This permeable pavement is also considered by city ordinance to be permeable and not impervious surface area. The remaining portions of the lot will be paved with asphalt and concrete curbs. The proposed lot coverage percentage for the north lot is approximately 56%, and the south lot is approximately 35%, well below the 60% maximum that is allowed by code. Next slide. Required stormwaters for both lots will be provided in the stone base below the parking lot surfaces. The amount of storage to be provided within this stone base is equal to 100% of the expected runoff from the 100-year storm event. These stone areas will be provided under drain that will have a controlled release to the Eggleston Avenue storm sewer. Additionally, a new storm sewer will also be provided along the east side of the north parking lot to provide drainage to an existing low area at the north end of the lot and on the adjacent lot to the east. This new sewer will be connected to the Eggleston Avenue sewer as well. Next slide. This slide is an exhibit from a study that the city consultant Christopher B. Burke Engineering prepared and shows the extent of the existing flooding that occurs within the Spring Road corridor. As depicted, the north parking lot is fully inundated by this flooding, and well over half of the south parking lot is affected by this flooding. This flooding and the city and county regulations relating to building construction and flood protection make the construction of any new homes on either of these parcels incredibly challenging, if not impractical. Any new structure would be required to have its lowest floor, including basement, at least 2 feet above the known flood elevation. This would preclude either of these houses from having a basement and would require that the houses be elevated to an impractical elevation that slopes and grading could not be reasonably achieved. Next slide.
At this point in time, I'd like to turn over the testimony to Louis Abuna. He is our professional traffic and parking engineer. We've previously provided his address. Louis, if you will take over and make your presentation on traffic and parking.
Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. Again, my name is Louis Abuna. I'm a traffic engineer and a founding principal of KLOA. We're located in Rosemont, Illinois. I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering, as well as a master of science in structural engineering from Northwestern University. I'm a professional engineer in the state of Illinois, as well as a registered professional traffic operations engineer. I have over 30 years of experience in both traffic and transportation engineering, as well as parking. Next slide, please. So we were asked to prepare a parking study to determine the adequacy of the parking supply within the Spring Road Business District, and accommodating the parking needs for the local restaurants, retailers, and offices, and also to ascertain the need for additional private parking for Roberto's restaurant. As you can see from this exhibit, the district, as you know, fronts both sides of Spring Road between the Chicago Central and Pacific Railroad on the north and Villette Street on the south. The district is bisected by the Illinois Prairie Path, which creates a barrier separating the convenient parking into two distinct areas. Next slide, please. So in terms of the parking characteristics, the north of Prairie Path, we did an inventory to determine what the parking supply is currently provided. And as you can see that currently there is a total of 50 on-street parking spaces, varying from 2-hour parking spaces to 7 10-minute parking spaces, 6 of which front the Roberto's Ristorante. There's also a public parking lot on the west side of Spring Road, just north of the path. Provides a total of 70 parking spaces, 10 of which are limited to 2 hours. And then there are a number of private parking lots serving some of the businesses that front the road, and those provide a total of 102 spaces. So the total parking supply for this portion of the business district north of Prairie Path totals 222 spaces. Next slide, please. South of the Prairie Path, there are a total of 60 on-street parking spaces and 16 public parking spaces that front Prairie Path on the north side. And then there is a variety of lots of different sizes that serve a number of businesses along that portion of the district, totaling 190 spaces. So the total of public and private for the Southern District is 266 spaces. Next slide, please. So we focused on the area north of the Prairie Path, and what we tried to do is to estimate the parking demand for those uses that front Spring Road. We couldn't go out and do what we normally would do, is that do surveys to determine the actual demand during various hours of the day and different days of the week due to the current pandemic, and we didn't feel that would represent the actual demand. So what we did is we looked at 3 applications in terms of determining the demand for these different uses. First was the City of Elmhurst Court of Ordinances. The second was the use of the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual. And the third was the Urban Land Institute Shared Parking Manual. All of these sources offer ratios and guidance on determining what the parking would be for the different uses within that corridor. What we did in addition to that is we applied the shared parking concept where we determined the hourly demand for these different uses on a weekday and a Saturday so that to take into account the different peaking characteristics. So for example, their office uses along that corridor, they would normally peak during the day, whereas restaurants would peak at night. That offsetting of the peaking of those parking needs or demand would result in a reduction in the overall parking requirements. So by doing that, when we applied the City of Elmhurst code, the parking demand for the uses along that corridor north of the Prairie Path totals 322 spaces. And when you compare it to the 222 spaces that I referenced earlier that are currently available, both public and private, we end up with a deficit of 100 spaces. Similarly, when we apply the ITE parking generation manual, that yields the demand of 269 spaces with a deficit of 47. And then the ULI ratios yield a higher demand, resulting in a larger deficit of 205 spaces. Next slide, please. So essentially, based on those findings, we've determined that the proposed 56 parking spaces proposed to be provided for the patrons and employees of the restaurant will be beneficial for the business district based on the following. The proposed 56 parking spaces will accommodate up to 61% of the peak parking demand estimated to be generated by the restaurant. Number two, the proposed parking lots will provide more accessible parking for the customers and patrons of the restaurant. Number three, the proposed parking lots will open 56 additional spaces for other businesses within the business district, particularly for businesses located north of the path, including users of the path who may park in these locations. And finally, the proposed parking lots will reduce the projected deficit in parking available for the businesses along Spring Road. Next slide, please. We also took a look at the traffic evaluation in terms of the impact of those parking lots on the roadway network, namely Spring Road and Eggleston Avenue. Spring Road is classified in the city's comprehensive plan as a community collector roadway, and it carries over 6,500 vehicles per day. Eggleston Avenue east of Spring Road carries approximately 600 vehicles per day and is classified as a local roadway. The restaurant is estimated to generate 892 two-way vehicle trips per day and 95 trips during the weekday evening peak hour. Again, these were based on published data by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. We estimate that 90% of those trips currently use Spring Road, whereas 10% are estimated to use Eggleston Avenue. Again, those are, while we're estimating these trips, those are existing because the restaurant is operational, and that traffic is out there traversing these roadways and looking for parking customers looking for parking. So yes, again, I'm sorry. So trips generated by Roberto's are existing on the roadway network, and due to the deficit of parking, these vehicles potentially circulate the area looking for parking locations. So providing the two parking lots will reduce the circulation of vehicles throughout the area and help reduce the congestion that is created as a result of that. And even with the additional traffic on Eggleston, because of the customers parking in these two lots, our analysis indicate that both roadways will continue to operate as currently classified by the city comprehensive plan, and that both of them will have adequate capacity to accommodate the additional traffic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buna. At this stage, I'd like to basically state for the record, our application was comprehensive on this particular file. We included the way that we met the standards for this particular application within the text. We adopt those particular answers that are incorporated into the application and ask that that be made part of the record. Since we filed the application in October, we also completed the traffic report. We did some additional investigation. We reviewed reports that were prepared by the city consultants as well as other outside people, and we made certain modifications to the design. What you have seen presented by our design engineer this evening are the final designs that we are proposing for this particular site, and they are a little bit different in terms of the number of parking spaces and the way that the parking spaces are configured for turnaround space as a result of the work we've done the last 2 months. I'm going to address essentially 3 things. I'm going to address how the area is zoned. I'm going to address how the area has been planned. I'm going to address some of the historical issues as to how it got there and how those fit into what we are proposing. First of all, how is the area zoned? You can see the detail on the left essentially is an excerpt from the city zoning map. On the right, you can see the configuration of the property in the triangular shaped area. We are at the southwest corner of the triangular shaped area for Roberto's restaurant, and the area that we propose to put the parking lot into is immediately to the east. There's a small area of a total of 8 residential lots that are zoned R2. Everything else to the west is zoned C1. There is a large block of land to the southeast and east that is zoned for R4. The vast majority of the land in this particular quadrant is either R4 zoning or C1 zoning and has been for nearly 50 years. It dates back to 1970. Next slide. The proposed north conditional use parking lot is zoned partially C1. That's the portion that we acquired from the city for the vacated alleyway. And the rest of the north parking lot is zoned R2. The south parking lot also has split zoning. The north half is currently occupied by a long vacant house that is zoned R2. And the southerly portion is zoned R4, medium density multifamily residential. This is an unusual zoning pattern, and it is pronouncedly mixed use and has been for decades. Next exhibit. The area of the 2 proposed, oops, I'm losing part of the screen. There we go. The area of the 2 proposed accessory parking lots presents a well-defined and notoriously persistent mixed-use pattern that was partially created by the past zoning decisions of the city and partially driven by outside forces, including a court of law. Next screen. The mixed-use zoning, you can see where the parking lots fit in, and the southerly lot, you can see where that mixed use entails a portion that is zoned R4. To the east of that is the townhome development, and to the east of that is an apartment complex. Next slide. The R2 zoned island reveals a total of 8 lots with R2 single-family zoning. This island of R2 zoning is surrounded by R4 high-density multifamily zoning and C1 local shopping district. The isolation of this R2 zoning is then further cut off to the northeast by a diagonal raised-grade industrial grade spur line. The 8 single-family lots are improved with a total of 7 single-family homes currently. One of those was demolished approximately a decade ago, 2 decades ago. And one of the 7 homes being vacant, that's the one that we propose to convert to a parking lot. Next slide. Therefore, the high-density multifamily residential and C1 shopping district areas essentially partner with the industrial rail line to isolate a total of 6 occupied single-family homes with R2 zoning. This land use pattern was both a result of long past affirmative decisions made by the city to place R2 single-family zoning immediately adjacent to the Spring Road commercial land use and a court decision dating back to 1970 zoning case. Next slide. Land use as of 1970 depicted a large commercial florist facility that is on the property that currently we propose to be partially used for parking lot and otherwise is occupied by the townhome development. This slide happens to be from 1978. Next slide. Prior to 1970, the Spring Road commercial land uses were using the rear of their lots to park vehicles, store garbage dumpsters, and access was provided by a city-owned 15-foot wide commercial alley. The alley and commercial parking areas were immediately adjacent to single-family homes on both the north side of Eggleston Avenue as well as on the south. Next slide. As of 1970, this mixed-use pattern was established by the housing, by the land uses, as well as a long historical pattern. Based on information provided from Eileen Franz, she's advised me that this subdivision dates back to 1915. 1915 would be approximately 15 years prior to the advent of the Euclid decision, which essentially fostered in contemporary zoning. So the age of this particular subdivision area predates even the existence of zoning. And it existed from a point in time that the Prairie Path was essentially a rail line. At this time, as of 1970, Spring Road frontage was solidly retail commercial land use. Parking for Spring Road frontage was to the rear of the buildings and on street. Publicly owned alley provided vehicular access to parking into the service and garbage removal portions of the commercial buildings. And single-family homes were immediately adjacent to the alley and parking lots for the commercial building fronting on Spring Road. Large multifamily use was to the east and a commercial florist was in the center. Next slide. In 1970, there was a lawsuit. In August of 1969, the Hatch family owned the 1.56 acre parcel of property located on Eggleston, which had long been utilized as a greenhouse and florist shop. The Hatch family filed an application to the city to enter single-family zone property. Is there an interruption? Okay, I'll continue. They filed an application to rezone the property to a multifamily land use zoning to permit the development of a 42-unit apartment building on the site. The Hatches submitted that their parcel was within a mixed-use neighborhood and was immediately adjacent to an existing apartment complex to the east. The requested rezoning for multifamily rezoning was unanimously recommended for approval by the City of Elmhurst Zoning Commission on November 3rd, 1969. Next slide. The adjacent neighbors objected to the rezoning for multifamily land use. The neighbors argued that allowing apartments at this location would constitute spot zoning because the neighborhood was a single-family neighborhood rather than a mixed-use neighborhood, and the introduction of additional multifamily residential land use would decrease property values. That's drawn directly from the minutes of the Special Zoning Commission dated November 3rd, 1969. The Elmhurst City Council agreed with the neighbors. They disregarded the unanimous recommendation of the Zoning Commission and denied the requested rezoning. The Hatches were left with single-family zoning. Next slide. The Hatches filed a lawsuit in the city and asserted that the denial of their multifamily zoning request was unconstitutional restriction of their property rights, and it was an arbitrary and capricious decision. The trial court agreed, and the trial court held that the city was unjustified and unreasonable in restricting the Hatch 1.56 acre property to single-family residents at this specific mixed-use location. The court entered a judgment order which zoned the Hatch property for multifamily development in 1971. Next slide. The Hatch property, which includes the area we propose to use for a parking lot in part, was rezoned to multifamily residential by court order. That's where the multifamily came from. Next slide. The judgment order specifically said that no structure could be erected on the remnant parcel. That's the part we want to build a parking lot on. This court order said it would be restricted and that to anything other than surface development. And section B, it says that the front yard for the area that we want to use for surface development shall be reduced from 25 feet to 10 feet solely for the purpose of permitting maintenance of parking, including surface thereof, as close as 10 feet from the south line of lots 2, 3, and 4. That was the order that the court entered. Next slide. In early 1990, the property was still vacant. An application was filed with the city to obtain a variance for the 1.56 acre property subject to the 1970 zoning case. Frank Casey and Chris Nicholson of L&N Development Company requested a variance to permit 2 separate townhome buildings on the property where only a single townhome building was permitted, and proposed to restrict the development density to 13 units rather than the 42 units authorized under the 1970 zoning case. Next. In 1990, the zoning was agreed to by the City of Elmhurst. This went through a process that involved the Plan Commission and involved City Council. There was a presentation made associated with this particular requested modification. It was agreed to by City Council, and the city entered an agreed order in 1990. This agreed order included the same provisions, and the R4 parcel of property that we proposed to build parking lot on was once again restricted to any use other than surface development, and restricted to surface development for the purpose of maintenance of parking within 10 feet from the south line. That is the agreed zoning that was modified by the city in 1990. And that is the parcel that we propose to build on, that is the R4 portion. Next slide. You can see that the R4 portion that we're proposing to build on is the portion that was restricted by that agreed order. Next slide. Then with the 1990 agreed order zoning in place, the townhomes developed. Thus, both the initial purchasers and any subsequent purchasers of each of the townhomes made their residential investment at least legally charged with the knowledge that the land immediately west of the townhome development was zoned for multifamily development, but restricted to being used for surface parking by a court order agreed to by the city of Elmhurst. Now, on this slide, I want to make one modified disclosure. I spoke with one of the residents from the townhomes today. They recently moved in within the last year. They were not aware of this particular restriction. They hadn't investigated the zoning and they didn't know of that. When I say that they were legally charged with it, property owners purchasing property are fundamentally charged with the knowledge of how the city has zoned and planned the area. So when I say they're charged with the knowledge, I acknowledge that some of the people wouldn't investigate this and may not have known when they made their investment. Next slide. Additionally, there were some houses that were built immediately north of the R4 parcel. One of them is 270 Eggleston. One of them is 266 Eggleston. These properties are also adjacent to the area that was restricted in 1970 and re-restricted in 1990. Both of these homes were developed after that zoning was placed. Next slide. Thus, both the initial purchasers and any subsequent purchasers of each of the two new single-family homes at 266 made their residential investment, once again, legally charged with the knowledge that the land to the south of their home was zoned for multifamily development, but restricted to surface parking by a court order agreed to by the city of Elmhurst. And their home was located in a mixed-use neighborhood where historically the city had deemed single-family homes immediately adjacent to multifamily homes and apartments, as well as commercial alleys and parking lots to be compatible. That's the area that they built into. Now, I also spoke with one of the owners of those two homes. I don't think that owner was actually aware of the zoning on this parcel of property. And in my investigation and work with the city attorneys and city planners, I think that these facts and background circumstances actually came as a surprise to some of the planners as well. This is a quirky, little, strange development where the city tried to restrict the area to residential zoning previously. They were sued, and a court of law ruled that the city did not have constitutional authority to do that restriction as it related to that application. Next slide. Thus, this is the area that we are coming into. We have very, very nice townhomes occupied by some very, very nice owners. And we have a couple of very nice single-family homes that are there that are adjacent to a parcel that can only, by the city zoning, be used as a parking lot. Next slide. That's the way the zoning developed. So you've got a mixed-use pattern. I've done enough work in the city that it's unusual to have mixed-use patterns such as this. They don't spring up every day. And I think the historical development of this area gives rise to how it came about. So recognizing that, your professional planning team has developed the award-winning 2009 comprehensive plan. Recognizing how the general area that we're dealing with is zoned for mixed-use land and how the persistent mixed-use zoning pattern came into being, how is it that the city of Elmhurst formally planned for the future development of this mixed-use area? What have the previous plan commissions and previous city councils defined as the future public interest at this location? Next slide. The 2009 comprehensive plan expressly states one of its goals: community subareas. The new comprehensive plan focuses on 9 community subareas. These locations are comprised of primarily non-residential land uses, generally located along high visible transportation corridors and gateways, as well as within the city's neighborhood commercial shopping areas. As a mature community with very few new areas for development, the plan seeks to leverage economic development possibilities from these locations while ensuring stable and compatible land use relationships with adjoining area. That was one of the major goals of this 2009 plan, these sub-areas. Next slide. The 2009 comprehensive plan expressly states, the city of Elmhurst is approaching a critical juncture during which critical growth and development policy decisions will heavily influence the physical, economic, and social landscape of the community for years to come. It is a built-out, mature suburb with little available vacant land for development, yet pressures for additional development within the downtown and community as a whole indicate a significant potential for change in the future. Additionally, the number of sub-areas are on the brink of major change the city should proactively seek to direct for the benefit of the entire community. Next slide. As part of the 2000 Development Comprehensive Plan, a sketch plan workshop was conducted by the City of Elmhurst professional staff. This is included in one of the appendixes to the 2009 plan. This professional staff workshop sketch study represented multiple different departments within the city. The land use concepts developed through the staff workshop made the following key recommendations. Spring Road Business District. This is one of the sub-areas. Recommendation number 1. The commercial uses north of the Prairie path could be developed into mixed-use buildings, 2 and 3 stories in height in the future. Number 2, the vacant parcel behind Roberto's restaurant should be developed as a commercial use associated with the restaurant. 3, additional parking could be provided by acquiring single-family homes on Eggleston behind the commercial parcels east of Spring Road. Next, the 2009 Comprehensive Plan also expressly includes, as part of the appendix, that as part of the development of the Comprehensive Plan, a sketch plan workshop was conducted by the City of Elmhurst Plan Commission, this body's predecessor in interest. Some of you may have actually participated in this plan since it was only 2009. The land use concepts developed by the Plan Commission included the following key recommendations. Spring Road Business District again. Number 1, lots along Eggleston Avenue should be redeveloped for residential use, potentially including townhome or condominium uses. Alternatively, mixed-use development could extend further east on the north side of Eggleston. 2, additional parking could be provided by acquiring single-family homes on Eggleston behind the commercial areas east of Spring Road. Next slide. The Spring Road Business District sub-area was part of the award-winning City of Elmhurst Comprehensive Plan, specifically studied the neighborhood of Spring Road and adopted a special sub-area plan. Next slide. The Staff and Plan Commission sketch plans for the area included these 4 of 6 proposals. And I'm going to go through these one at a time. You can see the code land uses are there in the color coding to the south. Next slide is proposal 1. You can see that this is the Staff and Plan Commission sketch plans for the area. It proposed that all 3 of the single-family homes, as well as the Old Fort parcel, be converted to parking. Next slide. This slide anticipated that the mixed use would be extended and replace the single-family homes, both that we proposed to construct parking lots on, as well as 3 of the single-family homes for mixed-use development. The next slide. This slide showed maintaining the residences to the north, but replacing the single-family homes on the south side of Eggleston with parking on the last plan. And this plan showed the expansion of commercial even further into the project adjacent to the existing townhomes. These were the Staff and Plan Commission sketch plans that led to the recommendations that were provided as part of the comprehensive plan. Now, next slide. Additional parking for Spring Road restaurants is contemplated by the official plan. This sub-area plan expressly recommends a reevaluation of the adequacy of area parking as new restaurant space like the multiple Roberto's expansion is added. The sub-area plan expressly recognizes that with appropriate landscaping and other physical improvements, they can adequately buffer the commercial uses on Spring Road, inclusive of their parking areas, from the residences to the east. That's a finding of the comprehensive plan itself. Next slide. Conclusion, the comprehensive plan. In summary, the City of Elmhurst has specifically planned the property proposed for these conditional use parking lots with very consistent and repeated recommendations from the city staff, the Plan Commission, and City Council through the adoption of the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan expressly recommends 1, new parking should be constructed as needed in the area. Number 2, the area north of the parking or Prairie path should transition to either commercial, mixed use, high density residential, or parking for the commercial properties on Spring Road. C, use of landscaping, berms, or other improvements can provide adequate buffering between commercial uses, including parking and adjacent houses. And D, additional lots along Eggleston Avenue could be converted to parking for the commercial uses along Spring Road, including Roberto's. Now, the reason I point this out is that the comprehensive plan is the active guide that is supposed to guide land use decisions of City Council. It is supposed to provide guidance to the Plan Commission for the recommendations that they make on petitions that come before them. But more importantly, it's also supposed to guide the owners of property in the area and the parties who are purchasing property with the idea that they're going to present those properties to the city for conformity with the planning criteria that they have adopted. Next slide. The neighborhood outreach meeting. It should be noted that the applicant conducted a neighborhood outreach meeting about 6 months ago and invited all the neighboring owners through their attorney, William Graft, and the alderman and city staff, both at the meeting and since. The Moreci family has repeatedly sought input and direction from the neighbors to determine how they would like to see the yards and parking lot landscape, how they would like to see them screened, what lighting controls they would like to see put in place, how they would like the fencing structured, so as to ensure that the design that can be submitted that will provide the adequate buffering mentioned in the Spring Road Business District Sub-Area Plan. Simply put, buffering and screening and code-compliant lighting will be installed in both of these parking lots. But we don't want to and have not wanted to be presumptuous and simply say, we're going to design the screening that is intended to serve you. We have sought input from the neighbors. We were very pleased to get some input and some feedback from neighbors this evening at what we thought was a very productive meeting. We hope to get more of it in the weeks that come. But these issues are not as simple and they're not black and white. Fencing can be 100% opaque. If you go south along Spring and look at the parking lots behind the commercial properties on South Spring that are immediately adjacent to single family homes, drive that area associated with the next street to the east. The screening along that corridor was 100% uniform nylon fencing, and I believe it was actually 8 feet tall. It looks quite nice from the alley and provides 100% opacity, but you can't see through it. Some people prefer what is called chain link fencing, where you can put landscaping on the other side of the chain link fencing, still maintain the privacy, but get the full view of the greenscape and the landscaping. We don't know what the neighbors want. We don't know what level of opacity they want. Some people would want a brightly lighted parking lot that is code compliant. Others would want a dimly lighted parking lot that is code compliant. We want to make sure that it's safe, but we want input from the neighbors in terms of lighting. Our hours of operation are really tied to the function of the restaurant, but landscaping is another issue. Some people like arborvitae. They grow quickly, they fill in quickly, they can become quite tall. We'd like input. And then we have 2 rather large landscape areas that form the front yard of these 2 parking lots. Some neighbors want that heavily landscaped and completely screen the parking lot for all users. Others may want the open green space and visual of being able to actually see into the parking lot and how many vehicles are there. We welcome input on all of those issues, but ultimately this is a conditional use application. The Plan Commission and the City Council have the ability to attach appropriate conditions to granting a conditional use. We welcome all reasonable conditions that can accommodate the considerable needs of the neighbors who live in a mixed-use neighborhood. Next slide. Landscaping and fencing opportunities. You can see this exhibit highlights the big 25-foot wide landscape opportunities that are in the front yards of both of these. Those areas cannot be used for parking under the code if we are going to be code compliant for the yard setback, but they can be used for landscaping. So we welcome that opportunity without destroying the sight lines that your traffic engineers want to maintain. Next exhibit. At this opportunity, our witnesses are available to answer your questions. We once again reiterate that we would like to have our application and the text address the standards for us in writing. And at this time, we turn it over to questions from the commission and however you would like us to proceed, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now entertain any questions from commissioners. Commissioner Burns, and then Commissioner McCoy, and then Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Okay, I have questions for Mr. Mondes, Mr. Abuna, and for Mr. Day in that order. I'll start with Mr. Mondes, Michael Mondes. Let's see, my first question was about fencing, but I think Attorney Day addressed that. So I'll skip over that. With the parking lot lighting, it was described as LED lighting. And could you further describe it? Will it be, for example, what I've heard described as down lighting, lighting, designed to, as much as possible, keep the light on the subject site and away from neighboring properties?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, we're proposing to use LED fixtures which have a flat lens on the bottom, so the light is directly down as much as possible. In the old days, you used to have the lenses that used to kind of bulb down, and then they would put cut-off shields. But with the LED fixtures, they're a flat lens, and the light is directed down.
Okay.
So, and obviously they put foot candles at the immediate point underneath the light, but then that light diminishes as you go further away to a point where we're at the code compliant 0.2 foot candle at the property line.
Okay. And then I was wondering if you could speak a little more in some detail about the stormwater requirements, and specifically that you would meet all the DuPage stormwater requirements for on-site retention. And let's say in the case of a 100-year flood, that water would be kept on the sites, and at what rate they would flow out to the sewer system.
We have the city of Elmhurst has, the codes actually are more restrictive than the countywide ordinance as far as detention requirements or stormwater volumes. So we trigger the thresholds. If we were in the county, we wouldn't have to do nearly as much as we do being in the city of Elmhurst. So within the city codes, we are providing the required amount of detention storage. The one thing that we're doing even above and beyond the code requirement is we are providing detention for 100% of the 100-year runoff volume, meaning that in the 100-year storm, all the water that falls on this parking lot, that water is being stored on this lot. Ultimately, that storage is connected to the storm sewers on Eggleston, so it can drain out at some point. But the water that falls in that 100-year storm is stored on site until the point the sewers in Eggleston have the capacity or drain down to allow that water to drain out.
Okay, so in your opinion, if you compare the status quo with what's on those sites now versus what is proposed to be installed, which condition would provide the superior stormwater control?
Well, currently the lots as they exist today have no stormwater control, so that water runs off and contributes to the flooding that occurs within the area. So in a developed condition, we're actually managing and storing all that runoff on site. So my opinion would be is that in the proposed condition, we've actually are improving the condition over the current condition.
Okay. Okay, Mike, thanks very much. I'm going to ask questions for Louis Abuna.
Yes, sir.
To meet you here. I've read a number of your company studies. So one question I have is, I noticed that the ULI parking demand was in the 400 range, and the ITE manual demand was in, I think, the 269 range, something like that.
That's correct.
So does the ULI manual generally produce higher estimates than the ITE manual? And is there some difference in methodology, or what, one is shared parking and maybe one isn't? If you could explain that.
Yeah, I mean, they're two independent studies or publications. ITE probably has more surveys and access to data than ULI. ITE it's in multiple generations of publications, whereas ULI, I think it's a third edition. You can see a 10th versus third. So, IT has a large database, more larger than ULI. They have, more classifications of restaurants that could be more applicable in this case versus the ULI.
Okay. And you mentioned that because of the pandemic, there was no chance to do on the ground investigations of what the quote unquote normal conditions would be. Was there any information from the applicant as to, let's say, how many customers they would get back in the pre-pandemic period?
I can certainly speak to it. My understanding is, the restaurant has approximately 220 seats. They could serve up to 150 people during lunch, depending if they have functions or not. But their business is mostly in the evenings, and they can have anywhere between 175 to 400 customers during dinner time.
Okay, so you did have some of that historical information.
Yes.
And you mentioned peak parking demand. That was in one of your slides for Roberto's, peak parking demand for Roberto's. What is the peak parking demand period for Roberto's that you were using?
That would be dinner time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any distinction between days of the week, particular days of the week?
Well, we looked at both weekday and Saturday.
Okay.
And we looked at it in the context of how does this demand of this restaurant interacts with the demand of other businesses along that corridor.
Okay.
That's where that shared parking concept comes to play.
Then there was another statistic, which is the generation of two-way trips.
Yes.
Which is different than parking demand per se, right?
Yes.
So how did you build up the two-way trip estimate?
For the roadway network, that's published data. So we use that. For the restaurant, again, it's based on ITE. They do have, data for this type of restaurant, and that enables us to estimate the traffic both for the peak hour as well as for daily traffic.
Okay. And then I think this question is particularly important for the neighbors. I understand that you said that the categorizations of the roadways, Spring Road and Eggleston, would not change under the new condition. They would still be have the same labels as they have now.
Right.
Will the proposed parking lots induce new traffic demand on Eggleston, and to what extent?
It will for that short segment between the entrances to both parking lots and Spring Road. Our expectations currently that the majority of the traffic is oriented towards Spring Road because that's where the parking is. By making those two lots available on Eggleston, that traffic that is searching up and down Spring Road will now head towards those two parking lots within that short segment. Okay. East of there, we don't anticipate that pattern to change. People that are using Eggleston now to come to the restaurant, which are probably more of a localized traffic, will continue to do that. But we don't anticipate just because the lots are moving, parking moving from Spring to Eggleston to these two lots, that would cause more people to be more, inclined to use Eggleston to get to the lots or leave when they leave the lots.
Right, and just to clarify, when you say there wouldn't be more people coming in Eggleston, you're referring to coming, say, down Argyle across the tracks, and coming from the east, heading west on Eggleston.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thanks. Now, Scott Day, I have a question for you, if you don't mind. Included in the materials that were provided on board docs and also in a very thick binder that the commissioners received were about 580 pages of Spring Road corridor study. And I did go drive around and look at all those areas, and I did see the fencing that you referred to. But I wasn't quite sure what was the purpose of providing all the non-map pages, all the backup, the deeds, the assessed values, and so forth, if that was supposed to illustrate anything for us.
Okay. I'm glad you asked the question. I think the commissioner is referring to this binder that we put together, hundreds of pages. What we did is we went through the entire Spring Road corridor because we're aware that there are many commercial parking spaces throughout the corridor that are immediately adjacent to single-family residential homes. And what we did is we pulled all of the public records regarding each of the single-family homes that are immediately adjacent to parking lots. And what we searched for is we searched to determine exactly how the local assessor has defined the equalized assessed values for all of those homes that are immediately adjacent to the public parking lots. And we reported that for the last 5 years. Secondarily, we looked to the homes that were in the same neighborhood, but were 2 or 3 homes removed from the commercial parking lots. And we pulled the same information with respect to the homes that were removed from the commercial parking lots by 1 or 2 other single-family homes. And then we reported exactly how the assessor has defined the equalized assessed values for each and every one of those homes. And then lastly, we pulled photographs of the various homes at each of the locations and pulled the records for all of the homes to determine which homes that were immediately adjacent to commercial parking lots up and down the corridor had sold, and pulled copies of the deeds and added the deeds to those records as well, so that you can see the actual fair cash market value as associated with the revenue stamps that are attached to those deeds. These records establish some very interesting things. Some of the nicest homes in Elmhurst have been constructed along the Spring Road corridor, 1/2 block removed from Spring Road, immediately adjacent to parking lots. And you'll see the photographs of those homes, some very, very large homes, well in excess of $1 million that have been constructed in recent years immediately adjacent to the parking lots. The equalized assessed valuation of these homes also reveal that within our neighborhood, where we only have 6 homes that are going to be left, that are currently left, 2 of the 6 homes are already adjacent to commercial parking lots. We know that they would prefer not to be adjacent to a commercial parking lot for Roberto's, but 2 of those homes that don't want to be adjacent are already adjacent to commercial lots for the car wash. And you can see each of the homes that are adjacent. You can see the prices at which they have been selling and what this documentation reveals. If you drive around and look at it and look at the homes, look at the details the way that we have put them together, you will see that the equalized assessed values of the homes are very, very stable adjacent to the commercial parking lots. The equalized assessed values of the homes that are 1 and 2 houses removed from the commercial parking lots are very comparable and also very stable. And you can see that there has been a very persistent, over the last 5 years, increase in the equalized assessed value for all of the homes, regardless of whether they're adjacent to the parking lots or whether they're 1 and 2 houses removed from those parking lots. That's what this report reveals. We put it together in a graphic form. We hope that it is easy for people to read because we know that you're going to spend some time looking at it. And we asked Eileen Franz to actually post it to board docs so that we could be assured that any of the neighbors that have concern about their property values would be able to research this and gain some sense of confidence that they're not destroying their property values if this thing gets approved. Now, lastly, let me say, there are people that have the opinion that they don't want to live next to a parking lot. That's a valid opinion. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. If the opinion is precipitated by a fear that their property values are suddenly going to plummet and they're going to be worthless in comparison to where they are currently situated in relationship to the parking lots, I think that these records display evidence to the contrary.
Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. Commissioner McCoy.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I had a couple questions about the parking lot, the bike parking in the lot, that Prairie Path patrons will be able to use the lot to park their cars, and the fact that these lots are both dead end lots. What's the turnaround for somebody that has to turn around inside the lot and go back out? And the fact that the people, if you're coming out of the lot, the north lot, you're coming out of the lot, you see that the traffic is, backed up trying to get onto Spring Road. Has there been any thought about people turning right, then going up Eggleston and going into the residential area? Then I also wanted to ask a question about how you're going to monitor other people using the lot, like the Prairie Path people or somebody that's going into the other shops on Spring Road. And I just wondered, is this going to be used like for the valet parking mostly, or does Roberto see this as patrons parking themselves?
Let me take the first question.
Okay.
In terms of parking, I think there was a suggestion that this parking lot would improve the parking for the Prairie Path. We think that it would, but the parking lots are to be dedicated to Roberto's and Moreci customers only. And you are capable of setting reasonable conditions associated with the parking lots. You can restrict their utility to the hours that Roberto's is open. So they're asking to be open from 10 o'clock in the morning until midnight with staff leaving prior to 1 o'clock. You can restrict the hours that those parking lots will be used. That's number one. Number two, patrons leaving the parking lot. I saw that the city's traffic consultant raised a question about that as to whether or not we're going to be, number one, increasing traffic generally in the area, and number two, increasing traffic on Eggleston east of the parking lots. First, this is an area where the city doesn't require any parking. The Spring Road area has no mandatory parking requirements. Roberto's currently has 3 or 4 parking spaces behind the restaurant, and they seat 200 patrons. Those patrons have nowhere to park other than searching the area, looking for wherever they can park currently. That's what they're doing. They are driving around Spring Road. They are looking for places to park. They're driving on Eggleston. They are driving on Spring. They are searching the area and basically circulating, looking for a place to park. We are proposing to construct 56 new parking spaces where we currently don't have any, and we're not increasing our customers. These are the 56 people and employees that are currently driving all over the neighborhood looking for a place to park. We think in and of itself that will improve the parking. And you have the ability to control the hours. In terms of access moving east off of Eggleston, we've discussed this with your professional planning staff. You have control over the jurisdiction of your roadways, and Eggleston is a city road. On a right-of-way, you can post signs directing traffic leaving these parking lots to access exits out to Spring Road. You have that ability. Because it's a conditional use, you can also direct us as the applicant to post signs in the parking lot, directing our patrons when they leave the parking lot to exit headed westbound and use Spring Road. You have the ability to do that, and you can do that as part of the approval for this particular conditional use now, or you can wait and see whether or not traffic headed eastbound on Eggleston is a problem. And because you have control over the jurisdiction, you can post the signs yourself, or you can compel us to post it if that traffic becomes a problem in the future.
Thank you. Could you please tell me where the bike racks are going to be?
At the southwest corner of the south lot is one location where we have a side yard that can accommodate bike racks. We've included that as a concession, again, to your comprehensive plan. I know that you have been working at bike right-of-way in your roadways. I know there was a plan for extensive bike right-of-way and replacement of parking in the Spring Road corridor as well, basically removing parking in favor of bicycle lanes. We recognize that sustainable transportation is a good idea for the community, and it helps all of us. So we'd like to accommodate that by making available bike racks in both the north and the south parking lot. And they're in the corners where landscaping space is available.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Commissioner Snyder?
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, my first couple of questions I'm going to direct to City Planner Franz. And just for clarification, so there's a single conditional use application for the 2 separate parking lots. but just to verify, we're considering deliberating and voting on each proposed lot separately, and it's not a package deal, is that right?
Correct. Two separate, you could potentially approve one and not the other.
Okay. And then my second, and this is just for my own understanding, is that, I understand that if the conditional use permits are granted, that the plats will be consolidated and processed administratively. But I'm curious about consolidations involving parcels that have different zoning classifications. So how would these newly consolidated parcels be zoned? Since they would have each, would they be just hold two designations, or how does that happen? How does that work?
They would be split zoned. They would maintain their existing zoning. They would just be one lot. And this is something we have, it's not ideal, but it is permitted.
Are there other instances of that in the city of Elmhurst?
Yes. I believe, let me think a minute. I believe there's a situation over at the Elmhurst Clinic, right over at Haven and Schiller. And I believe there might be another one down south. I can double check. We do have a few instances of it. I can get them for you for the following meeting if you'd like.
It's okay. Thank you for explaining that a bit more. So my next question is for Mr. Day. I'm not an attorney, so I'm going to need you to kind of walk me through this a little bit from my own understanding, but I did read the original judgment order. And when I read through that, I understood it to be more about preserving the right to build multifamily developments rather than preserving the right to build a parking lot. So the spirit of the judgment order really seemed to be to preserve the parcels in question for multifamily development by disallowing structures and only allowing surface parking until, and let me refer to the document itself, and it reads, no structure except for surfacing shall be erected on the following portions of the subject premises, and then it goes on to read the legal description, and then quote, until and unless the subject premises lots 2, 3, and 4 in said Hoffman's division of lot 32 in Argyle addition to Elmhurst shall be under common ownership. So it sort of seems to be saying we need to save these parcels to refer back to for the multifamily development rather than saying, hey, we're only allowing parking. So maybe you could just explain a little bit more, because as you were going through it, you made it sound as if the only thing that could be built was surface parking, period, when in fact the judgment order seemed to expand on that and explain it a little more.
Okay. The properties are zoned R4, but they cannot be constructed for any R4 use. The property can't be constructed for anything at this point in time by the court order that was agreed to by the city. And the only thing that is permitted to be constructed on these parking lots currently, because we do not own the 3 lots to the north, we only know one of the 3 lots to the north. The only thing that is permitted to be constructed on the lots by the zoning is surface parking.
Okay, so of those 3 lots in question, 2 of those, since the judgment order's time, 2 of those had new homes built on them. So how was that possible?
Right. And as a result, since we don't own them and they're not involved in this application, the only thing that can be currently done under the zoning that's been imposed and agreed to by the city is surface parking. We're zoned R4, but we can't do any use on the property other than surface parking.
Okay. I guess maybe City Planner Franz can explain how, since that same condition would have been imposed on the other 2 lots, since the judgment order, those lots new homes were built on those lots. So was that just because the owners of those lots had, can you explain that, please?
The court did not have jurisdiction over lots 2, 3, and 4. It did not. They were not part of the zoning case. The only thing that was part of the zoning case was the land that was now the townhome and the land that we are petitioning for that is R4. So the court had jurisdiction to impose zoning for the parcel that we are discussing, the R4 parcel of property. And the court said, until you own the 3 lots to the north, you can't do anything with this other than parking. And that's the zoning that the city agreed to for our parcel.
Okay, moving on. I don't know who would best answer this, but how are you planning on directing patrons to park in either of the 2 lots? Will there be signage posted?
we would anticipate that there would be signage that says parking for Roberto's.
So, okay. And then in that same vein, so I'm having a little trouble reconciling the statement that these two lots will likely be the patron's first destination when looking for parking, as well as the KLOA parking study conclusion, which states that the proposed 59 parking spaces will open up 59 additional parking spaces for other businesses within the district. So there appears to be an assumption that customers driving to Roberto's would 100% of the time first choose to seek parking in one of the two proposed parking lots, rather than use available street parking or public parking right across from Roberto's restaurant. So furthermore, the traffic study states that 90% of Roberto's traffic is currently estimated to use Spring Road, with only 10% using Eggleston, where the two proposed parking lots would be located. So why would it be more convenient for patrons to drive by available street or public parking on Spring Road in favor of the two parking lots? Wouldn't it be possible that both the street parking and public parking would be more convenient, and then the Roberto's proposed parking lots would just become overflow parking?
Would you like me to answer that, or Louis?
Whoever you feel is best.
Louis, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Either way, Scott, I'm fine. I mean, I can take a shot at it, and you can.
Go ahead.
You can chime in if you want, but I mean, these two lots are not going to meet the 100% needs of the restaurant. So we do expect some of the customers to seek parking, whether it's on street or in other public lots. But you know, for repeat customers and who are aware of the lots and aware of their availability, I suspect that many of them will find it more convenient to park in these lots versus searching for on-street parking or the public lot, especially if they are all full.
But I guess that implies that on-street parking would already be full for other purposes, whether it's Roberto's or other businesses. So I'm just trying to figure out why. It's just sort of seems to me that the street parking and the public parking, because traffic is primarily using Spring Road, would be the first to fill up, since Roberto's entrance is not going to move, correct? It will remain on Spring Road?
Correct.
Okay.
I think our position, Commissioner, is that since there is a deficit of parking for the commercial uses, somewhere between 50 and 200 spaces, depending on whether you use the city code, ITE, or the UL.
ULI.
Regardless of which standard you use, there is a parking deficit in the area, somewhere between 40 and 200 parking spaces. By providing 56 new parking spaces at this location for Roberto's customers, we have to decrease the demand on those other parking spaces that are available. We are increasing the supply considerably, and our patrons, we're only providing 61% of the parking for our facility at the peak hour. So even at that, we're still going to be using some of those other parking spaces, but we're significantly reducing the circulation.
Okay, yes, I understand that, but you're not increasing parking globally, you're just increasing parking specifically for Roberto's, right? I believe that's what you stated.
That's correct.
Exclusively for Roberto's, okay. So moving on, so the customer entrance to Roberto's, as we just discussed, is on Spring Road, but there appears to be a delivery and employee entrance at the rear of Roberto's. So for ease of access from the proposed southern parking lot, would that rear entrance become a customer entrance, or will the patrons still have to walk around to use the Spring Road entrance?
At the moment, yes, it is used for the drivers and the drivers only. For the employees at work, that they use the back entrance.
Okay, so when a patron is parking in that southern parking lot, how is it proposed that they'll make it around to the front entrance of Roberto's? Because I didn't see a sidewalk in the plan that led from the south parking lot and connecting to that sidewalk that runs along the south side of the building.
That would be in a future project, if there will be one.
So there would be a sidewalk installed then on
Yes, correct.
that lot, so that would increase the impervious surface, is that right?
I'm sorry?
that would increase the impervious surface if you're planning on installing a sidewalk on that property? On the
Yes, correct. Or a back entrance, correct.
Okay. And then this is for my next question from Mr. Abuna regarding some of the underlying assumptions to generate the parking demand. You did mention that the ITE manual is older, more accurate, has more accurate data. Something that sort of jumped out to me is that Roberto's was classified as a high turnover sit-down restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And for the purposes of, it's my understanding that the ITE trip generation manual provides different data sets used to determine parking demand depending on the restaurant land use classification. Is that right?
That's correct.
So who determined that Roberto's was a high turnover sit-down restaurant and not, say, a quality restaurant? And how was that determination made? What's the difference between those two classifications?
I think it's representative of this type of restaurant. I think based on our discussions with the owner and the turnover, I believe the high turnover fits the operations of this restaurant. The next classification after that would be more of a high-end, white cloth, restaurants that will have a lesser turnover than this restaurant would.
So who made the determination? Was it Roberto's that said we're a high turnover sit-down restaurant?
No, this is something based on our understanding of the operations. We made that determination.
Oh, okay. So what are the criteria to determine whether a restaurant's high turnover sit-down or quality? The ITE manual must have some.
Again, like I described, the quality restaurants are more of a high-end, white cloth, like steakhouses and restaurants like that, where people stay there for an extended period of time, and the turnover is a lot limited. The capacity of the restaurant could very well be also less than what this restaurant offers, and things like that. So this. This Roberto's, kind of fits more the high turnover restaurant category that ITE has in its manual.
Well, how broad is that range? Because my understanding is restaurants like Chick-fil-A would also fit into the high turnover sit-down restaurant category. Or
no, there's a separate category for that. That's more of a fast food type of restaurants. So the Chick-fil-A's and these type of restaurants have a different category for their parking needs, and it's totally different than Roberto's or the high-end restaurants.
Okay, all right. I think that is all of the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, other questions from commission members? Commissioner Garland.
Thanks, Chair Rose. And this might be for Mr. Day or one of the Moreci family members, and this is perhaps building on Commissioner Snyder's questioning around the access point and the use, in particular, the south lot. As it stands today, based on the proposal, how would a customer that is parking in the south lot get to Roberto's? What's the pathway for them to walk?
We do have a sidewalk along the Prairie path if they were to park back there, but we also do, as of right now, still have an access door, which right now is just an emergency access door in the rear of the actual restaurant, not the carryout. The carryout is where the drivers go in and out of. There is another doorway which could be made not as an emergency exit, but as a way for guests to also go in.
So just to clarify, then there is an access point on the southwest corner to walk along the southerly property line there to Spring Road to enter Roberto's through the front door. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. This may be a silly question, but is there a requirement for handicap parking at all in any of these, either of these lots?
Mike Mondes?
Yeah, I don't believe so because there's no ADA route from these stalls to the businesses themselves. So no,
Right.
I do not believe so.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my last question would be that there was a reading through some of the submissions that came from the residents. There was a concern of some potential contamination. Is that a factual statement? And are there issues that you've surfaced based on any sort of testing? And I guess there would be some remedies that would need to be made to deal with any sort of contamination.
Perhaps I can answer that, Commissioner. The first I have heard of this concern was this evening, or one of the neighbors actually raised the concern. Apparently there is a perception that when the townhome development was first constructed, the developer tore down the former florist shop. And there is a perception that the debris from the destroyed florist shop was deposited into the R4 parcel of property and then covered with topsoil. So there was a request that I haven't even had a chance to speak to our engineers about, and that is whether or not that particular neighbor can test the content of the debris that is within the deposit on that R4 parcel. I'm going to have to raise that with Mike Mondes. I know we've got one of the residents that this evening announced that they're interested in testing it for asbestos. So I don't have an answer for you. I told the resident this evening it's a reasonable inquiry, and we just have to figure out what the answer is.
Yeah,
we all want to know if there's contamination.
Scott, I would note that we did have a geotech soil borings done, and they were performed. There were 2 borings that were done in that pile, and at least in the soil borings, there was no indication that there was debris. It was dirt that they found in the pile. Not to say that it can't be elsewhere, but at least the initial indications are that that's not factual. But
what was the depth of the boring?
They went through the pile, and I think they went to 15 or 20 feet there.
Okay.
They went to the native soils because they got through the pile. That pile was placed on top of the topsoil that existed, and they got into the native clays below that. So,
thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Many of the commissioners have already asked questions that I had on my list, but a couple of additional have bubbled up. As a resident who lives in the area, I frequently travel the Eggleston to Spring, and my residence is located south along Spring Road. Oftentimes there's quite a bit of traffic that backs up on Eggleston, and with the street parking the way it is, it's very challenging to see cars that are headed north and southbound on Spring. Has there been any consideration by the traffic consultant in regards to this, and any consideration regarding, potentially a stop sign there or anything like that?
Perhaps I can address that. Ultimately, the city controls its right-of-way. If the city perceives that there is a problem in a particular location, they have the ability to post stop signs or other traffic control devices, and it's really not within our control. It's something that the City Department of Public Works and your planning department takes care of.
Is that something, though, that KLI looked at when they were doing their study?
Louis?
We didn't specifically look at that issue. If I am understanding you correctly, your concern is relative to sight lines of traffic exiting Eggleston onto Spring because of the parking on Spring Road?
Correct.
Okay. Again, like Scott said, this is something that it's something the city can definitely examine. We did not, when we did our inventory, we did not determine that as being an issue. And I believe the way the parking spaces are located do meet the sightline requirements. I know sometimes it gets difficult if there is a van or an SUV park that makes the sightlines more challenging. As far as creating an always stop control intersection, to do that, you have to meet certain criteria published by the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And based on the count data that we have available for both streets, Eggleston doesn't have or carry enough traffic to warrant or cross the threshold where an always stop control intersection would be warranted.
Okay, thank you. Another question, I think this would probably be directed to you, Mr. Abuna. And this is along the similar lines to Commissioner Burns' line of questioning prior. Due to the pandemic, you weren't able to do a study, as you normally would have, actually getting out to the site and seeing what's happening there on a somewhat regular basis. But instead, relied on city ordinances, the ITE manual, the ULI shared parking manual.
Right.
When you are able to do, the visual study, does that usually match up well with those other three guidelines that you've referenced in your report?
To a certain extent, obviously, when we do surveys, it's what time of the year you're doing them, because a lot of times that can play a factor in terms of the determination of what the demand is. But we normally, when we do these surveys, we always check back with industry standards and check back with the local municipality ordinances, just to kind of make sure that the numbers are matching up. But to a greater extent, this data that we use, especially with ITE, is very comprehensive, and it's based on numerous studies of similar uses that have been done over time to come up with these kind of ratios and kind of distribution during different hours of the day. So I would expect it to be similar. Maybe a little lower, but I would expect it to show the deficit that we are predicting with these methodologies.
Okay, and then one other follow-up question to that. You'd mentioned that you had questioned the owners of Roberto's, the Moreci family, regarding different things, peak hours, days a week, those types of things to help in terms of your demand numbers. Were there any conversations that took place with other business owners in the Spring Road district, specifically to the north side of the Spring Road district?
No, we did not have those kind of discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pittman.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I had a question about this remnant property on the south, behind 270 and 266 Eggleston. And I think this is a question either for city planner friends, or I believe the city attorney's somewhere on here too. I guess I feel that we're in a weird position regarding that specific parcel. The applicant needs a conditional use to get parking, but there's a court order specifying that that specific parcel can only be used as a surface parking lot. So I guess I'm having a hard time with that part of this piece and wondering how we could say that they couldn't use that land for what is a court order is saying that it can only be used for that. So I guess I wanted some feedback specifically about that parcel itself and whether the applicant could have come in and asked just for parking on that piece, and whether we would really have standing to deny it or not.
Andy,
Are you
do
asking
you?
Andy Acker? I think Andy is here.
Yeah, I'm here. So, you know, your question is actually a good one. It is an unusual setting for the city to be basically zoned by a court. What happened back in 1990 is that in conjunction with the amendment to the judgment from 1970, so they went back in 20 years later, asked the court to amend the judgment to allow 2 apartment buildings to be constructed. Part of what that did was, along with that, there was a conjunctive zoning action that was taken. So it basically, the city endorsed the outcome of the judgment by way of a zoning procedure. So, you know, it's not like, you know, we did have a hand in it. We did think it was a good idea at the time. We did take affirmative zoning action to endorse what happened. So you know, it's not like we're completely dictated by the court. The original 1970 judgment did in fact do that, but back in 1990, 20 years later, there was a zoning involvement and there was a subsequent zoning relief granted by the city.
Okay, thank you. That does help. I did have another question too for city staff. In our packets, we received information about the potential city property being used for flood detention areas. And I was curious where that stands in terms of that work getting done, considering this area does have some serious flood issues. And a lot of the letters from the homeowners had concerns over those. And so I guess I wanted to see where things were at. It seemed like they were looking, based on what was in the packet, they were looking for potentially dollars in the 2021 budget. But when would that start? And what's the hope in terms of doing that work?
So I believe our public works staff are still looking into that and trying to find locations and money for that. I can get a clarification from our city engineer to see exactly where in the process they are with that right now. If anything has changed, I'll let you know at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can add to that, Commissioner, that I've been representing the city in its dealings with the IEPA for its stormwater issues. You know, the city has in the past 6 or 7 years invested approximately $40 million into a sewer system. So the city is about its business trying to improve for everyone, you know, its sewer systems and the flows. Obviously, this is a historically flooded area due to its proximity to Salt Creek. I do know that this is on the list of things to do. Unfortunately, the city has limited resources, and you know, $40 million later, we still have more work to do, unfortunately. So, you know, I don't mean to diminish the importance of this to the residents, but help, I believe, is on the way, and it's something that has been a historical issue.
Any further questions, Commissioner Pittman?
No.
Commissioner McCoy?
Thank you, Chair Rose. I know that in 2003, Roberto's had come before the commission to request a parking facility behind the building that's on the north west corner of Eggleston. And I'm wondering if the lot that's now behind, just east of them, their building, had they ever in the past looked to have that be made a parking area? I mean, I guess this is a question for the Moreci family. Had you ever in the past looked into the possibility of having that piece of property just east of your facility, your building, made into a parking lot?
At that point, I mean, we did not own the property, but we've always looked at it to see if that's something, a parcel that we would be able to use for parking.
Thank you.
lost Susan.
Any other questions? Commissioner Callaway, I'm just checking with you. Any questions right now or?
Nothing right now, Chair Rose.
Thank you. I have a few questions I'd like to ask. I'm curious as I look at your plan for parking on the north lot. Why are you parking cars on the north lot on the side that's closest to a home as opposed on the east side as opposed to on the west side where it would presumably be less intrusive in terms of lights, et cetera? Can you just give me your thinking on that?
Perhaps I can address that, Madam Chair. I think you're discussing the L-shaped lot to the south. The north lot has parking on both sides.
The north lot has parking on both sides. Okay.
Yes. The north side has a central aisle and parking on both sides. The south lot, as it relates to the north leg of it, there was a suggestion. In fact, your planning department contacted us and said we've got at least one person that's interested in whether or not you could flip the parking for the south leg. And the idea was to move the parking spaces so that someone would pull in through the city alley, take an immediate hard left, and then traverse to a travel aisle that would be adjacent to the east property line. And then they would pull in by pulling the vehicle westbound into parking spaces that would head in immediately adjacent to the alleyway. Now, the problem with that plan is, number one, there is a line of power poles that traverse the separation between the parking lot and the alleyway. What we are contemplating is that we're going to have the vehicles pull directly from the alley into the travel aisle and then pull eastbound into the parking spaces. When they back out, they will have a 26-foot wide travel aisle to avoid the phone poles. And from our perspective, if we reverse that, the vehicles would be backing out of those spaces and would be far more likely backing out where the visibility isn't as good through the rear window to traverse over the curbside and perhaps either damage landscaping or the fencing that would be adjacent to the resident. We think the much safer likelihood is to pull in the way that it is currently designed. We did actually submit a secondary plan so you can actually see what this looks like. We've discussed it with the Roberto's ownership. Snow removal would be more difficult, and our design engineer said it's much superior the way that it is currently designed from a safety standpoint.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about lighting hours. I'm going to ask City Planner Eileen Franz. Current ordinance for parking lot for lighting hours, could you please confirm what those are?
So I don't believe we have a limit on lighting for parking lots. There isn't anything in the zoning ordinance. I will double check the municipal code and make sure there's nothing in there. I know we've talked about this in terms of sign lighting in the past and when the hours of an illuminated sign can be on, but there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that would limit the hours of a parking lot lighting, but I will double check with the municipal code and see if there's anything in there.
So theoretically, the parking lot could be lit from, let's just say in December, from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 7 o'clock in the morning. Is that theoretically possible?
Theoretically, but I will double check that and confirm with you.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious, employee parking. I know you said you've got about 70 employees. Is there one of these two lots that you, or some area in those that you would be designating as employee parking versus patron parking, knowing that it looks like employees would be there later? So I'm curious if you would designate one of those or some area as employee parking or no.
As far as the 70, 20 out of those are drivers. So those drivers are pretty much in and out as they do right now. They pick up food, they leave, drop them off at the homes and come back. To just dedicate parking where they would park either on a north end lot or on a south end lot where the L shape is, it's kind of hard to determine. To just dedicate some strict parking for them.
So you have not thought either on either one of these lots that would be employees at all? You haven't, can you?
Well, I mean, they would be employees, but unfortunately we can't just put signs up and just stating that they are employee parking. But that's where our intentions are, to have the employees stay away from the public parking and the streets and park in the radar. Except we won't be able to put signs just to dedicate for employees, because it will probably deter a customer from parking there if there is an opening.
Okay, so you don't intend to have any spots that are dedicated to employees at all, whether that is for delivery or whatever, you just don't intend to do that?
Right, I mean, for delivery right now, they're actually right in back of Roberto's.
Right, I understand that.
Behind the back entrance there. I mean, of course, the employees are we're actually going to deter them and tell them that they need to park there, but I won't be able to put a sign just to reserve parking for them. But they know that that's where they will be parking.
Is that true that they cannot designate some spaces in their parking lot for employees only? Is that true, Eileen?
No, I mean, they could potentially do that if they choose to.
Right.
So you could choose to do that. You could designate some of that parking just for employees, correct?
Madam Chairman, I've discussed this with the family. The concern is they don't want to discourage patrons from parking in the two lots. And if the parking spaces are designated as being for employees only, those patrons are going to go back out and start circulating the area and looking for parking. That sort of defeats the ability of the parking spaces to diminish circulatory traffic on the roadways looking for parking.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you just clarify for me, is it 59 slots or at 56? I mean, I saw a bunch of these.
By the time we added 2 turnaround spots, so that a vehicle that gets in, finds all the paces are taken, there are 2 slots that have been added so that the vehicle can turn around safely. By the time we added the turnaround slots, we lost 2 parking spaces, so the total is 56.
So 56 is the number. Okay, it's not 9. Okay, right, because I'd seen several things. I did not see on any of the plans, and maybe I missed it. Could you just give me some idea of what you are thinking? And you talked a little bit tonight around fencing, landscaping. What is the thinking about that at this point?
Our thinking as it relates to landscaping is we want to be responsive to the neighbors. We have discussed with the neighbors that actually met with us the idea of opaque white nylon. It's not nylon, it is a vinyl fencing product, very similar to that which is adjacent to the commercial properties and residences on South Spring Road. We have discussed the idea of arborvitae because it's a very dense green foliage. It grows relatively quickly and provides nice separation. We have discussed chain link fencing for those that want some visibility through. We have to discuss the height of fencing because I think your standard is 6 feet. Some neighbors might want 8 feet for additional privacy. Some neighbors might want 6 feet to have additional sunlight. All of those are considerations, and we think that those are much more tied to our ability to communicate with the neighbors, and we're still exploring that.
Okay, thank you on that. I'd like to just talk a little bit about the lighting. I kind of looked at that. The lighting, these are, what did you say, 16-foot poles? Is that what I read on the plans? Is that how tall they are?
I'll let Mike address that.
Yeah, that is correct. They are 16-foot tall poles.
Okay. And they are to be cantilevered away from the residential homes, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. And then I have some question really about landscaping, berms. I didn't see any of that. This is something you're just still in process with in terms of determining what kind of landscaping, what kind of berms. It looks like your hope is that you would hope to be able to work with the neighbors around that, or do you have some more specific planning for that?
Landscaping berms, I will tell you, there's all sorts of regulations. First and foremost, landscaping berms displace floodwater, meaning you're filling in an area and creating a higher area. As soon as you displace floodwater to create a berm, you have to create additional compensatory storage to account for the volume of water that you have displaced. The berm has to be at a certain grade rate where you can only go up so many inches for each foot. And in the areas that we have for side yards, there is such a diminished dimension that there's virtually no place to put berms on these parcels of property other than front yards.
Right, I may have not been as clear in my speech. I was talking about landscaping and or berms.
Okay.
So, you just talk a little, you mentioned arborvitae. I mean, anything else you have for that? Any thoughts around that?
We are prepared to put in any fencing and landscaping that the neighbors deem desirable at their location and the commission believes is beneficial to the city. So we are prepared to landscape, we are prepared to fence, we are prepared to fence and landscape. We're prepared to have the city tell us what to put in. We're prepared to get input from the neighbors to put that in. We don't want to simply thrust a design on the city unless you instruct us to do so.
And Eileen, that can be, approval can be conditional upon approval of the landscaping.
Correct.
Correct.
Landscaping plan, so that would be one of the things that would be done. Okay. I just have a general question about, and I know now is a relative term, restaurants are closed, et cetera, but I'm curious where all of these people are parking or where they were parking before March 1st. Can you just give me some idea on that?
Go ahead, Pasquale.
Well, if there wasn't any parking on the street or in the public parking across the street, they would park on Prairie Path Lane. They would probably even try finding parking spaces on Eggleston itself. If there were people that we would see them at the time of it, because we are active in there, we don't, just kind of stand around and just watch, every little angle. It'd be nice if we could, tell the customers about parking the building down at the corner. But when we did have the availability to do that, we would direct them in that parking lot, which is on Eggleston and Spring, which they would be able to park back there.
My understanding is that these parking lots, and please correct me if I'm wrong, could be, will they be used solely by your patrons or could anybody use them? It sounds as if, I'm just curious what your thinking is and how you will monitor that.
Well, primarily it's for our patrons and ourselves.
So it would be signed that it would be just
Roberto's parking, correct.
Okay. And even in off hours, or would you consider opening up in off hours to people?
That would be something that we would need to discuss.
That you what? Could you say that again?
We would need to discuss it as a family to do something like that.
Okay. You are open till 12 and your liquor license allows you to serve until 12, right now?
Yes. Well, as of right now, because of COVID, it's, I believe we need to be shut down by 11.
By 11, okay.
Right.
Before the pandemic, you stayed open until 12. This is your regular hours is 12?
Yes, on Friday and Saturday night, it was midnight. During the week, it was 11 o'clock. But of course, sometimes you have, there's guests that, they're having a good time. They're talking and, we might even end up leaving at midnight. But during the week, it wasn't that common. But on the weekend, it would be around midnight.
Okay, all right. So right now, I know that Stemples is closed, so you don't have anything there, but during the evening, they generally are not open in the evening. So where do before the pandemic, where did people park then? They just kind of rolled around the.
They were just driving around, just trying to look for parking. They would drop their guests off at the front door, and then they would try looking for parking.
Got it. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Hoffman and then Commissioner Snyder.
You know, I guess this piggybacks onto your question, Commissioner Rose. So you've been operating, you know, the restaurant since the 90s, right? I mean, I've been in town that long. And you mentioned in the application, you know, a tremendous amount of expense associated with what you're looking to do, and obviously a lot of work. Why now? You know, have you had a lot of patrons express displeasure with their ability to park around the restaurant? I mean, give me an idea why you're going through this expense and this headache to add parking.
It's for it's benefiting the establishment. I mean, there are a lot of customers that they would come in. Let's say that we, you know, during the afternoon, we would have a funeral for a memorial luncheon, or there would be some type of meeting going on. And, you know, you have about 100 guests. Most likely, if it's in the afternoon and it is a business, it's normally one person per car. So if you have 100 guests in there, you're looking at about 100 vehicles just for the patrons itself. At nighttime, to continue working the way we are, yes, we have had issues where customers like, well, where we're supposed to park. You know, so we tried directing them to places where, you know, it would be available, like right in the corner of Spring and Eggleston. Because after 5:30, there's nobody there. But that's because we're there. But if we're not there, they're just going around, and then they kind of walk in a little upset saying, you know, it's a local restaurant. Why do we have to sit around here looking for parking?
So is it reasonable to assume that by doing so, there's some pent-up demand that you're releasing that you currently maybe aren't getting because of the restrictions around the parking?
Yes, especially during the holidays. This has been going on for years. We have had reservations that have canceled. They would walk out, come inside, check in with their reservations, and the family members are going around, whether it's two families that are coming in, and then they're like, you know what, they can't find parking. We need to leave. And we were actually at full capacity at that time, and no parking across the street, no parking elsewhere was available.
Commissioner, from a timing standpoint, I want to say we actually started this process in fall of 2019. That's how long we have been putting this particular application together. So it's been a very involved process, but it also started well in advance of the pandemic.
Thank you.
Commissioner Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Rose. Yes, this is just piggybacking off of Chair Rose's question about employee parking. Where are the employees currently parking, or where have they been historically parking?
Historically, they have been parking across the street in the public parking lot.
Isn't there a 2-hour time limit there?
Well, they would park on the back end of it, like behind Doc Ryan's now it's Victory Pub.
Okay.
Yeah, so along the Prairie path, that is a 2-hour parking. I believe that there is around 12 to 15 spots. That is a 2-hour parking. But if they park towards the rear, there is no limit there.
Oh, okay. And roughly how many employees? You said there are 70 employees of Roberto's.
Well, there's 20 drivers. And then the rest of them, let's say on a Friday, so it's 20 drivers, which they're the ones that are primarily parking in the back, coming and going. And then the other employees, they would be parking across the street in the public parking, but not in the street. And then we also do have the lot on the corner of Spring and the Prairie Path Lane right now. That's available just for right now until it's the bank property. Yeah, the bank property until it's actually rented now.
Okay. And then I'm just curious about that building. It looks like separate but attached building to Roberto's. Is that part of Roberto's? that part of the restaurant?
The one along the Prairie path?
Yeah, it's the one that's right directly to the.
Yeah, correct. There used to be tenants there, but eventually we are planning on demolishing that building.
So, and then how would that work along with the parking? Like, what's the long range plan for Roberto's?
The long range plan is to possibly rejuvenate it up a little bit, maybe put a small expansion on it, nothing major, just for more work area space and a few more seats.
Okay, so the parking wouldn't necessarily be supporting an expansion of Roberto's operations in any way. It's just supplementing or providing support to existing operations and not necessarily looking at helping expanding operations or anything.
It would help the expanding operations because in the afternoons, which primarily when you do have some functions going on, early functions, they're mostly in the afternoon. So of course we don't have a full staff going early afternoon if you do have some type of functions going on.
Okay, so
it's mostly at nighttime.
Are you looking at hosting more functions then, where, for example, you would have large numbers of people all coming at the same time to attend a specific function?
Yeah, like a specific gathering, correct. Which right now we don't have those capabilities of doing because of whatever we have right now. It would actually contradict with our regular business by us constantly taking parties. So we would refuse one to take the other.
Okay, so if you were looking at hosting large parties or gatherings, that would impact the traffic flow. So restaurant operations, cars are coming and going at various intervals throughout the night. Specific events, you're getting large numbers of cars coming all at the same time. Does the traffic study account for that?
I'm not sure. That's something that Louie would have to answer.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I was just talking about you're looking at expanding your future operations to include events or perhaps larger events. So in terms of restaurant operations, you have cars coming and going throughout the evening at varying intervals, essentially kind of spreading out traffic flow. But when you have a larger event, you've got a larger number of vehicles all coming and going at the same time in order to attend the event. So did the traffic study account for that change in operations, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, we looked at the overall traffic operations. That's one of the criteria we looked at was the daily traffic. So that would encompass, all kind of activities, functions and typical, customers attending the restaurant. And that's how we arrived at the daily number and compared it to the, the capacity of the streets, Eggleston and Spring.
Okay, but wouldn't it be correct to assume that the traffic flow and capacity would change if it were a single event that people were attending versus a normal restaurant operation?
I mean, it would for that specific time period, obviously, and having those two lots will help alleviate some of those conditions where customers are looking for circulating the area, looking for parking. So this would definitely go towards alleviating that situation.
I'm getting at the congestion question in restaurant operations. So restaurant operations versus they're talking about expanding to include more events, larger events. So that has to do with congestion. So typical restaurant operations don't see everyone arriving at the same time to eat dinner. That's spread out through the evening, but an event, everyone would be arriving at the same time. So I'm trying to figure out if the traffic study accounted for a larger volume of traffic all arriving at the same time to get into that parking area. Wouldn't it back up onto Eggleston, and how would that traffic flow work, and does the study address that?
I mean, the study didn't address it specifically to that issue, but again, I mean, I go to my point is that having those two lots will help alleviate that condition, and having those two lots will allow for these events to take place while at the same time minimizing the impact on Eggleston and Spring Road.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yeah, forgive me if I missed this question and answer, but Is it anticipated that any of those other businesses that are along Spring Road that would be in front of the new parking, the 2 parking lots, that they would also be using this parking? So it would extend beyond Roberto's patrons?
The plan is that the parking spaces will be for the Roberto's patrons only.
Okay, so I guess I'm not clear on the answer. So then, am I correct, Mr. Day, then that parking would not be available for any reason other than use by Roberto's, either patrons or employees?
It is contemplated that it will be posted for Roberto's customers. The employees would be permitted to park back there, but it would be for Roberto's employees and customers.
Okay. So I want to pick up on something that you said, that certainly as the zoning commission that we could restrict the hours for the use of the parking lots.
Yes.
I guess, you know, and I have to think that given the comments, the extensive comments that we've received, that, you know, if this was going to happen, that would be a, you know, by some of the residents, that would probably be a welcome plan B. But I guess I'm thinking, you know, the restaurant's open till midnight. It's anticipated that any employees or I suppose patrons who are remain in the restaurant, you know, could be 1 a.m. before people clear out. I guess I'm thinking, practically speaking, while we can, I suppose, restrict the hours, and I think that comes probably with a sign that says this parking is only available till 11 p.m. or whatever the, you know, the time is. For all intents and purposes, I'm not sure that's really practical because, you know, that requires enforcement, I think, and I'm not sure how that would occur other than by the Elmhurst Police Department.
The only response I can give you is it's very common with conditional uses to specify hours of operation. Since this is a parking lot that is a conditional use, I too anticipate that the neighbors would like to restrict the hours that parking could occur at these locations as much as possible. I think the neighbors would prefer that they be restricted to 1 hour a day. But from a pragmatic standpoint, the applicant is advising that they need to start preparation and use the parking lot. They're going to be open from 11 o'clock until midnight. That's their conventional hours during the regular non-pandemic period of time. They need an hour of preparatory time in advance when the staff shows up. So essentially they're saying, we don't need to use them prior to 10 o'clock in the morning. We don't need to use them after midnight, but the rest of the time we need those available for the Roberto's customers because the restaurant is open 24/7.
Yeah, and understandably, I mean, I'm thinking the morning hours are less of a concern than, you know, than the late evening hours. But I guess, you know, you do make the statement, and I'm certainly not looking for you to clarify, you know, the enforcement mechanisms here. I just think it's a, you know, it's if it's something that we consider, I think it's a practical question that we further need to explore, because I just, I really don't think it's all that practical. You know, if the restaurant's still open and it's midnight and, you know, you can only park till 11, I just don't see that, you know, I think that's going to be difficult for enforcement. So it's just a comment. It's not something that I'm looking for you to respond to.
Any other questions, Commissioner Callaway?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Chair McCoy.
Thank you, Chair Rose. I have a question about the multi-tenant office retail building on the northwest corner of Spring and Eggleston. That has parking around that building. If I look at the schematic here, that parking is exclusively for that building, I'm assuming. But the proposed parking lot, of course, is just east of that. Was there ever any consideration of making an entrance, you know, off of Spring Road onto that parking lot, that north parking lot, so that it wouldn't be a dead end parking lot. It would be, you could like turn around.
We
You
did
understand what
discuss
I'm
that.
talking about?
Yes, we did discuss that with our traffic engineer, and we wanted to keep the two land uses separate. There is parking for that building, and that travel aisle that you're discussing actually provides the ingress and egress for the vehicles that use that particular building.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Burns.
Thank you. Just one last follow-up. In the status quo, how many private off-street parking spaces does Roberto's own?
Off-street parking spaces. We have the building that's on the corner of Spring and Eggleston. We have the old bank building on the corner of Spring and the Prairie Path Lane that we're utilizing right now because it is vacant. And then our other properties that our other tenants are using down on the south side of Spring Road between Spring Inn and Letza. So, and then we also have a parking lot, which is for the apartment building on the corner of Montrose and Spring. There's a parking lot back there next to a residential home.
Now, are those other parking areas, are those leased? Do you lease those spaces from the owners of the land?
No, those are ours.
You own them?
Yes.
Well, what about the bank parcel? Do you own the bank parcel?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you.
Other questions? I have one more, and please excuse my ignorance if I don't know this, but have you ever utilized valet parking?
Yes, we have tried that in the past quite a few times. The biggest concern was with our carry-out customers having a hard time parking in front of the restaurant, in front of the carry-out to pick up their food. Also, the valet not being able to, because we really don't have the proper egress to get in, so the valet then, the drop-off, so they would drop off in the middle of the street. And then quite a few times there were also the law enforcement that would come by because people were trying to get out of a vehicle or getting in a vehicle while the cars are trying to pull in, and it was producing traffic on the stop sign where Spring and the Prairie Path is.
So
going north.
Right, so you're saying you tried valet parking?
Yes, we tried a few times, yes. And we actually, it was complimentary parking. We did complimentary. We were paying for it by ourselves.
And it really just was not practicable given.
It wasn't practical. And of course, as soon as we stopped it, after about a month, people were looking for it, but they were complaining that they couldn't pick up pizza, but then when it wasn't there for them to have their dinner, then it was an issue.
Yeah, that's how it goes, doesn't it? So,
right.
All right, any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Snyder.
Yes, one final question. How far away is the north lot located from the Roberto's restaurant?
I don't have that dimension. We did actually prepare an exhibit that measures that. Mike, do you have that handy?
I'm looking for it, Scott. Hold on.
And I can share the outline or anything on board docs if you'd like.
If you can.
Yeah. Just let me know what attachment.
Commissioner, we're looking to pull up the document that has that dimension. Okay. I don't know if we can expand it enough to show it, but we did measure it, and both lots are within 300 feet of both buildings.
Well, both lots are within 300 feet of Roberto's?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Of the entrance to Roberto's? Yeah. 300 feet from the entrance of Roberto's, approximately? Is that what you're saying?
I believe Mike did the measurements to all of the entryways.
Yes, it is.
All right. Did you have another? Can Commissioner Snyder? Okay.
No, I just was curious about exactly how far away the north lot was from Roberto's property.
Okay. All right. While we're waiting, any other questions from commissioners at this point? Okay. All right. I'm aware of the time. It is 9:45. Let me just ask one more time. Any other questions from commissioners? No. Okay. The 15 minutes. Okay, here we go. We get it then.
There you go. I don't know if we can expand this or not, but this is the exhibit by which we did all the dimensions, and you can see that they cross between the two buildings with the blue lines.
I can't quite zoom in to see. Can you read the dimension for us?
The right of way, I believe, is 66 feet. And the dimension you're looking for is 300.
So the exact dimension from the parking lot to Roberto's is 300?
It's within 300.
It's within 300. Okay, it looks like it is 271.8 feet. Is that right?
Yeah.
And that is from the property line, from property line to property line.
That is the dimension from the right away at Eggleston to the back door of Roberto.
Okay, thank you.
And I just have a follow-up question on that. Does that, you would expect people who park in either one of those lots to come around to the front door, to use the back door? What is the expectation of that?
They would be able to use the back door if they like. Like I said, that door will be changed. Right now, it's just an emergency exit door. Or, of course, most likely they would walk around to go to the main entrance. So Eggleston to Spring and then Spring over.
Okay. Would you have any plans to, I know this is a little crazy since we just talked about valet parking, about offering valet parking at all again, or like if you get these two lots, that's the end of it. You would never do valet parking. People could just park on their own.
Right, they could park on their own. I mean, valet parking would be great if we would have something that would work for us. But at the moment, it would just be, for themselves.
All right. Any other questions from commissioners? I am aware of the time. We have approximately 12 minutes that we can move into public comment at this point. I'm going to do that. I want to do several things first so that first of all, we do not, I don't really intend to run this meeting longer than 10 o'clock tonight because we will extend the public hearing to February 2nd. So, and I know it may be tedious to listeners, but this is the process of how we would move through this. So normally in public testimony, we ask you to confine it to 5 minutes, but you also have the right to cross-examine anyone at this point, cross-examine the petitioner rather. I don't think you can cross-examine a commissioner, but you do have the right to cross-examine the applicant and the right to ask questions of the witness. You have the right to ask questions of the evidence itself, and you have the right to give your own opinion of the testimony at that point. I would ask let me just ask if folks wish to do that or want to wait until we are here on February 2nd. I know some of you have been waiting a long time, but I would ask you to be efficient with your time, be respectful of your neighbors and their time. So if someone has said something and you think that's a great point, that's what I was going to say. You can just get up and say, that's a great point. That's what I was going to say. You don't need to say it over. You are welcome to do that if you would like. So I will also say if there's a representative of any groups of people in here, if you want them to speak, we can go ahead and do that. They will be now limited to we have about 10 minutes left on this meeting. So those are the ground rules. For this, I want to make sure that anyone who wants to make public comment has been sworn in. If you have not been sworn in, we will have to swear you in at this point. But I would ask you to raise your hand to be recognized, and I will recognize you, and you have 5 minutes generally. But to make a statement, but if you wish to cross-examine, we would, that time really can be expanded. So let me ask the thoughts of folks if you want to get started on public comment, or if you would like to wait for public comment until February 2nd when we would reconvene. If there's someone who'd like to speak now, that would be fine, but you would have no more than 10 minutes at this point, or if you would like to wait until February 2nd, and we would, I will tell you this, on February 2nd, we have one case that we expect will go an hour, and then the remaining 2 hours, really we would be devoted to the continuing public comment, continuing public hearing on this case. What this also means is you're welcome to continue to post material on our website. So if there's material you want us all to read before then, feel free to bring it in and let us do it. So
this is Deborah Orthen. I was sworn in, but I can tell you that I would be much better if I was fresh on the next meeting with making sense of my notes and my questions.
You know what? I hear you. I would make that same comment about myself. I would be much better if I'm fresh, but you know what? I'm committed to being here till 10 o'clock. So if there are those who wish to make brief comments, we're happy to do that. If not, we could end this meeting and we would start again with public comment on February 2nd.
Chairman Rose, this is Erin Jason. Those who are assembled in conference room 2-3, consensus is to wait until February 2nd. I'm sorry. We do have one person who would like to speak.
Sure. Bring him on.
No worries. Please just stand right in front of this black box here and just look right at the screen.
I just want to make sure, sir, if you can give us your name and
just look at that.
Sure. My name is.
Make sure that, and were you sworn in?
I was sworn in.
Excellent. Go ahead.
So my name is Joe Bay. I live at 600 South Spring, and I had made some communications earlier to my alderman of my concerns for this project, and they basically come to two concerns. One is on water mitigation and flooding, and the other one is in regards to traffic. So, you know, it concerns me tonight that I heard things like at great expense we were seeking these parking lots, but that there was no anticipation of increased clientele, thus no increase of traffic. And then later on in the presentation, it seems very clear that there's going to be an increase in clientele, which is all business owners would pursue, but it also means an increase in traffic for the residents. So that I would ask the commissioners to take into consideration, that we're not only dealing with what is now, but what is going to happen in the future. In addition, it was stated that a true traffic assessment was not made due to the pandemic. It was also stated that millions of dollars have been spent to mitigate water and flooding in the area. In regards to the traffic, if the traffic assessment hasn't been made, I am requesting that things be slowed down until the traffic assessment can be made in normal situations. We're making decisions on almost no information whatsoever. And then when it comes to flooding, we don't have to wait for a 100-year storm. I live on Spring. I was up to my knees in water just this summer. I called my alderman over. I was inches away from having a complete breakdown of water into my basement. And there was a lot of testimony tonight by the experts that, you know what, we're going to be in better situation if these parking lots are put in. Well, my question is, and I'm not sure who can answer that, if those assertions that were stated that we're going to have better water mitigation with these parking lots, if those are incorrect, what recourse does the city and what recourse as a resident do I have? Does anyone have an answer for that?
Well, the usual procedure is this: we ask the applicant to take note of all these questions, and then after all the public speak, they can answer those questions. So instead of doing it one by one, that's what we would do. So it's a good question. Okay, and then in addition, we're talking about lots of things tonight. I mean, it's almost exhausting, quite frankly. But it's more than almost. It seems like we're addressing something right now, but it seems like there's a master plan for down the road. I mean, there's property ownership all up and down Spring. So is this the last expansion that the residents of Spring and Eggleston are going to be asked to accommodate, or are we given a guarantee that there will be no more expansion? Do you mean of this particular business, or no more expansion in general? Well, this particular business, because again, my concern is every time we expand, we have a more troubling water mitigation situation. And every time we expand, we have a more troubling traffic situation. And right now, everyone that spoke tonight and did very well doing it, very artfully done. However, whether it was the experts or the attorney or even the petitioners themselves, no one lives on Spring or Eggleston other than that spoke tonight. And yet the folks that will be living with this, the commission's vote or response are the residents of Eggleston and Spring. So I have great concern over the residents and what this will do to the neighborhood. I give you my solemn word that we will not be deliberating until we hear from residents. So the petitioners had presented their case today, and this is how we usually do it. Commissioners have full time to ask questions, and then we move to the public. So at our meeting on February 2nd, the public will have really lots of time to be able to ask these questions and bring that forward. And no deliberations will start until we hear some of that. So, okay. Well, I guess, so I will just conclude that I really hope that the commission looks at a true traffic assessment in normal conditions prior to a decision being made. And I would ask the commission to ask the petitioner what future plans, because we can't make decisions on this if there's other plans right down the road. You know, it just is going to be out of control. So those are my thoughts. Great thoughts, great comments. Thank you very, very much. So I see the time. It is now 9:59. So I am going to, we're going to close this. We're not going to close the public hearing. We're going to adjourn the Zoning and Planning Commission meeting. The public hearing will resume on February 2nd. Is that correct, Eileen?
Yes, it will be on February 2nd. And just to clarify, the commission does have a meeting next week, January 26th. This case will not be on that agenda. This case's public hearing will be continued until February 2nd.
And that's because we have 4 cases or 3 cases already scheduled for next week. And
right.
If we did that, you would be ultimately frustrated and probably probably not happy. You might be a little angry about that. So we want to do it at a time when we believe we will have at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to hear from the public. If we want to do that, if folks want to come in, you also still have, I will vouch for myself, and I know for probably every single member of the commission. I've read every letter that came in, made notes on it, thinking about it. So you can also give written testimony, but we'll have an opportunity on February 2nd to hear from the public who are interested in this. I know it seems like a ponderous process. I absolutely understand that, but I think the more thoughtful we are, the better decision we're going to make, the more time we have on this. This is not, and sometimes the petitioner is frustrated by how we move slowly on this. I've said before that, as soon as you get into this, our time is not your time. We have a way to proceed with this. So I guarantee to you that we will give adequate time to hear the public on February 2nd. That's our plan. And we will not move into deliberation until everyone's had a chance to give us their say on that. So I hope this meeting was useful to you, though, to hear what the petitioner had to say and to hear the questions that we on the commission have about this. And I hope that you come away from this with the sense that the commissioners take all of this very seriously, and we do not give a rubber stamp to stuff. We just really, we want to understand it and think about it. So we've heard this part, and then we'll give you the exact same level of consideration when we open up this on February 2nd. So that being said, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn, and we will reconvene in a regular meeting on January 26th, and our next meeting that will incorporate this particular case will be February 2nd. So is there a motion to adjourn in a second? Commissioner Callaway moves, Commissioner Pittman seconds. I'm going to ask Eileen Franz to please call the roll for adjournment.
Commissioner Callaway.
Yes.
Commissioner Pittman.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns.
Yes.
Commissioner Garland. Commissioner Garland.
He may be off, I don't know.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Chair Rose.
Yes. This meeting is adjourned, and I want to thank everybody for coming out, all the public members who were listening, and all the public members, all the public who came and actually came to City Hall. And I want to thank all of you for your interest and your concern for this community and for your neighborhood. And we will be able to take up on this on